And it says we're live. Awesome. Welcome to Vlog Thursday episode. I forgot to look. 246. I just keep tweeting these things out. I don't actually pay attention, and I just keep incrementing a number plus one.
That works.
Yeah, and I got Ray Orsini here, and me and Ray did a couple videos about VoIP and the nightmares that were going on with it that seemed to be settled down. You see the statement that bandwidth.com made?
Yeah, I did. They put up another one yesterday. They've put up a couple so far. Yeah. It's very anemic, unfortunately. They're not putting out a lot of detail, and things are still changing.
Yeah, it's I wish they could give us more, but I kind of get it that they can't. And me and Ray, we talked back and forth about this, like, why isn't it bigger news? But it's also really hard to turn it into news because unless you're someone feeling the pain of it directly, no one else cares. Someone's like, I don't know. And it's kind of it's a story without any leads behind it because we don't know who did it. We don't know why they did it. We don't know why they stopped doing it, or if they stopped doing it, or if it just got mitigated. And here we are with a week going by and there's simply no news on the subject.
and even like the statement, they said it's still going on, right? They're still receiving attacks, but they've been able to mitigate it up to now. They're much lower in frequency, much lower in throughput. And we see, like, if we've been monitoring the routes, right? You can easily start seeing when, they start announcing the /24s or whatever prefixes they have, and when the routes start changing, and Cloudflare is still very much in control of the routes. So, that leads, you put two and two together, you read the tea leaves, the DDoS attacks are still going on, or at least confirming what the CEO said.
Yeah. There's some noise out there, and we've seen other people reporting it, but it's one of those things. Like it's such a weird thing to do because you're burning down your own botnet. Like I don't get it, but
well, that was the crazy part, right? That's what we were talking about, where like it costs time, money, and resources to do this. And whatever agents you have out there, whatever PCs you've compromised and you have for a control agent, or for command and control agent, like, to have those resources. If you're one of these people, that's gold to you. That's your money. Those are your toolbox. And to sit there and say, I'm going to keep hammering it, and they're going to keep getting knocked off the internet until you have to move to the next one, to sustain it this long and have that much resources behind. I mean, that's the amazing part to me. That and the lack of news coverage, which that's a whole other.
Right. I kind of like what someone said here. We'll start throwing some of the comments up. We don't let Facebook engineers do our BGP updates, and we don't eat pineapple on our pizza. Society will come to order. So
I support that 100%.
Facebook took a day off, or at least half a day off, needed a little break, shut them data centers down, save a few megawatts of energy. Because that was wild that was megawatts of energy that they were talking about. Like, that's an interesting thing to talk about.
To me, that was the best movie. Like, I don't think I'm going to go to the movies this weekend. That was the most entertaining thing to watch. Both what occurred, the updates that were coming out of, the different engineering groups, the updates that Facebook and Cloudflare and everybody else put out, just the hows and the whys, and the engineers that had the skill sets to make the changes on the local devices didn't have access. The guys that had access couldn't get in the building. It was just this cavalcade of events. It was amazing. It was horrible, but awesome.
So did you see that Facebook's domain was for sale?
Yes. So you saw that? Did you see that on GRC? Or
yes.
I was watching that the other.
Yeah,
I love that. It's just
they were their own registrar, okay. So it went for sale because you couldn't contact the registrar for its availability. So the sniping tools basically put it up that they have. I'm like, this is beautiful.
But my friend Drew Hackman put out on socials the other day. He was talking about how the internet's made, and it's basically shoestrings, WD-40, some duct tape, and and sharks with lasers on them. Yes. And you start to look at this background where, like, anybody can announce BGP routes, or anybody can announce BGP and literally take down states or countries, and it's happened regularly. It's happened. And then you see stuff like this where the registrars, until Steve said it, I had no idea that, like, they're looking at other registrars, and if you don't have the name, it means we can use the name. And that is such a backwards way to handle.
No one has it. Who wants to buy Facebook.com?
Right? Oh man, I thought the auto discovery thing was bad. No, it's
no. There's a more calamity of stupid. Yeah, it was. So my friend Phil he calls it his flappy thing theory, and he says everything on the internet was a flappy thing that someone fixed, but then that started flapping. So they have a thing that checks the flappy thing, and then later there's another thing that checks the flappy thing, and then there's another bash script that keeps running to stop that bash script from doing the thing, and then this other one runs this, and he's come in and re-engineered some very large companies, and it always blows my mind because you're like, how did that you worked for who and they had what? It was just like he's always got these fun stories, and you're like, it's like you said, it's WD-40, some duct tape, some string here and there.
It's I liken it to when I used to be DJ way back in the day, and do events and stuff like that. And so when you were going to events, you'd have you go through the kitchens, or you go through the back rooms of these ballrooms and hotels and stuff like that, and you'd see the back areas. And while the front is all beautiful and marble and shiny and all that, everything is gorgeous, you go to the back and you go to the kitchens, you go to this place, and you're like, I would never eat here. I would never touch this stuff. It's like it's out of a scary movie. And anybody who's worked on like the background and engineering on big iron stuff, it's just that bad. We're in time for Halloween. It's perfect.
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of on that topic, because me and you started the conversation right away, and let's give you a little background of who Ray is, other than my friend who I've been talking to and having some laughs with for a few weeks now. Ray saved my bacon, and that's where some of this all started. We actually engaged with Ray's company. I know it's not how probably Ray wants to say, but we'll call it VoIP because that's what my staff keeps saying. But it's OITVoiP.
Yeah, that's the running joke with my friends. They do it on purpose at this point.
Yeah, I figured you wouldn't mind. And if you did, it's okay. We're going to do it anyways. But Ray's company is someone we were engaging with and doing, because they do not like SIP service, but like full service phones and everything else. So we were engaging with them and had some other projects we were working with. And, if people who follow this channel know, we use VoIP MS for like strictly really inexpensive zip trunking. But obviously VoIP MS was the first to get attacked, and we dog food here. We were on VoIP MS and no one could call us. And the few people that we sold on it didn't. And Ray was right in there. We'd already worked with some other projects. He jumped in and helped us and got us out from under that kind of immediate problem, things like that. But also, then Ray joined me for a couple of videos, and he's got a really interesting background, because that's why we titled this doing large scale networks. When he says big iron, that's actually stuff you've worked on. You've built some of these large scale networks. So if I'm not mistaken, you had before you were in VoIP, you did the MSP thing and kind of migrated over into the voice thing.
Yeah, so I've been doing IT since the early 90s. My first PC was the first PC I built was a 286DX, and
Nice.
went up from there. So and I went through like the web design days and the ASP.NET days, and all that fun stuff. And then in the early 2000s went MCSE, CCIE. So my background's actually building complex and distributed networks, right? Multi-city, multi-site, multi-continent. That's my jam. That's what I've been doing. Then I went the MSP route. Then I realized I liked working with MSPs more than I liked working with end users. And so
we all come to that realization.
Right. And then so, that paired with my networking background, paired with my VoIP background, I got into VoIP in the early 2000s also. I decided I'd rather work with MSPs, and partner programs came out, and that's what I do today. And we run our own VoIP network. We're not reselling anybody else's stuff. And it's fun. It's challenging. It's scary sometimes, because you think that could happen to me easily. But I love it. It's a blast.
Yeah, no, it's pretty cool. And especially that long history. When you said ASP, oh yeah, man, that's some old stuff. I mean, I used to have a developer I staffed years and years ago, and we built a few ASP things forever ago. And I'm so glad we don't do any of that now. Like that stuff. I feel bad because some of it's still running, and stuff we can't completely disclose publicly. Me and you were talking about before here of some of the tooling that is used in the industry that is still built on that really archaic language, and because no one wants to pay the technical debt to rewrite it in a modern language. So
you can see it. You can identify. Like every time I see an ASP page, like it just hurts a little bit, right? It's like, oh, and they're live. They're out there. You see them all the time.
No software here in 2021 should require IIS as a base thing it needs to run. I'm just throwing it out there.
Anytime you have we have a Linux version and we have a Windows version, and we recommend the Windows version because that's more reliable, that means you're building it wrong. I'm going to put that out there. So.
Yeah. One of the things that you definitely have a lot more experience with is going to be some of the enterprise networking gear. And we talk about a few of the networking gear, but you go a step further. You probably what's some of your like favorite high-end routers that you work with? Some of the big iron stuff.
So I like to say I got into VoIP because I hate phone systems. I got my CCIE, and that's why I'm qualified to say I hate Cisco. So these opinions are mine and my own, not my company's. But whatchamacallit. So yeah, I mean, I've worked on the big Nexus 9Ks and that's fun stuff. We're actually moving over. We swapped. Most of our data centers now are running Palo Alto. We're swapping over to Juniper Stack just because I like the SDN composition position of it. And so we're getting our guys trained up on that because most of our guys have Cisco certs. But Juniper has a very nice training program where you can migrate over, use your same training, and then they just translate from Cisco to Juniper. And it's really nice. So hopefully by this time next year, we'll be full Juniper Stack, and it'll be kind of cool.
All their stuff is all BSD based still, isn't it, for Juniper?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and I like that because, it's that technical debt you were talking about, right? Like on the Cisco side of it, and I'm not bashing Cisco. They're not the only ones. There's plenty of manufacturers out there. I'm not trying to harp on them. It's just, it's what I've worked on. But they have so much legacy code they've just dragged forward and forward and forward, where the ice is more on backwards compatibility, because when you have a $2 million switch stack, that upgrade doesn't happen all that often, right? You're not even changing blades all that often. But when you have and at anytime you incorporate something new, it has to be able to maybe swap out 25% of it. It's got to be able to be backwards compatible with the rest of the stack. And so where you look at stuff like, that's why I really like the SDN stuff, and we considered going white box for a little bit, but we wanted that commercial support, and I think Juniper was making the right decisions. And so knowing that their stuff is BSD based, they have an eye on security first, it made a lot of sense to me. Yeah,
they seem to have I've got one of my other friends really likes their stuff too. That's why I learned it was BSD based. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. And they aren't in the news for egregiously bad, horrible programming practices. And I've definitely, I have an entire video where I dump on Fortinet for some of their just poor life choices.
You mean hard-coded backdoors? I mean,
and the multiple hard-coded backdoors. Every time there's a problem, it's like it's static key or static password. It's like static. What do you mean static credentials? How does this thing get shipped like this?
I don't get that, and that's one of the things, not to go back to Steve, but that's one of the things Steve Gibson talks about regularly. It's, nowadays I have a lot of healthy respect for you log into a device and the first thing it asks you is to set your credentials. Right. Not even a hard-coded username. Like forget the admin, right? Like just set brand new credentials, period. As opposed to saying, here, log in with admin and then change after the fact. So, I really appreciate that. Anytime I look at a vendor and I look through their help docs and I search for default password and they don't have something there, that's a minor win in my book. I'll take that.
Yeah, eventually me and you are going to dive into this topic of vetting the vendors and just make a list of like, do they have this? Do they have this? Everyone has security flaws, and that's never just going and looking at a list of CVEs is never a reason not to go with a vendor. If it's a really popular product, there's probably a lot of CVEs. And something else we mentioned once again before was we won't call it any specific tooling in our MSP industry, but some of them don't even have CVEs, but had some egregious problems, and there's still no CVEs because they're not part of that. They don't get listed as CVEs. They're not big enough. They're not companies. They're very specific to our niche of market. So you can't even use that as part of your scoring. Like you almost have to throw that out. But if there are CVEs and they're from hard-coded credentials and really dumb ideas like that, then we can throw them under the bus.
Yeah, that's fair game. I mean, if you're going to walk in traffic, don't get mad that you get hit. You know what I mean? And that's hard-coded credentials is definitely that line, in my opinion. No, and that's one of the things a good friend Jason Slagle talks about, talking about openness of vendors, right? Like how transparent are they? And in our industry, there's some good actors, bad actors, in my opinion. but yeah, it's identifying that, like you said, having CVEs, having security events, everything is an opportunity, in my opinion. I'm very much a subscriber to that, right? So if you had something bad that happened, how did you respond? It's the old Batman, why do we fall so we can get up? I'm good with that. It's just, but a lot of times when you see absolutely nothing for a vendor that's been in the business 5-10 years and they don't have any security events whatsoever, that's a red flag to me. But we'll cover that when we do our vendor review.
God, there's going to be so much to talk about there. But, and the goal when we do that video is, of course, to give you the understanding and tools so you can apply it to any vendor. Here's a set of good rules to follow or questions you can ask them. You had commented on something I think a lot of people don't think about. I've seen people complain about this is when a vendor offers like a channel partner program and then also does direct selling. Well, there has to be some type of guideline and agreement. And you said this on Reddit where I seen the comment right away. I'm like, well, what's the agreement saying? The person didn't know because they didn't have one. And I'm like, well.
And that's kind of the trick, right? I get not every vendor is going to have these full pages of all these answers you need to ask and all that stuff. But I think the goal is let's get a baseline of questions we should be asking our vendors. And I keep saying to vendors, like I'm a vendor today, but I still consider myself an MSP. Like it's in the blood, right? But like that, that was my first thing when I see somebody complaining, oh, they did this and they took away my lead registration and they sold directly and they undercut me. And we've seen those vendors do that. We've all had experiences with that. My first question is, well, ask them if they sell direct and they sell to the channel, what's their channel conflict policy? If they don't have something written down, that's a problem. That's a vendor that's a red flag. And of course I followed it with my own channel conflict policy, because everything's an opportunity, right?
Yeah.
But I think that's the goal. It's that baseline of questions of, do you do this? How do you handle that? What's your policy on this? So that they can answer. And if they can't answer, your follow-up should be, okay, well, what are you going to do about it? And I definitely want to get that list together with you so we can empower the MSPs out there.
Yeah, they need some help because it goes around in circles a lot with them on that idea. We'll throw this one up here. I don't know if you've looked at this at all, but what do you guys think of the UniFi VoIP service? In Europe, it isn't launched yet. How's it going in the USA? I have, so I don't know if you know the history of UniFi VoIP, Ray. They actually had launched a previous product that torpedoed down pretty quickly and they kind of abandoned it.
It was pretty though. It had a nice big screen. It was very pretty.
Well, and I think it was Android based. Wasn't it like an Android tablet glued to a phone or something?
Yeah, but it was silver, right? I think I remember it was silver or something like that. They had two models. They had one with the big screen, one with the small screen. We played with it because it was open STIP, and my thing is, and that's kind of like when you and I were. And I feel bad because you say I helped you out, but I also kind of, between the VoIP MS thing and then the bandwidth thing, I kind of took you out of the pot into the fire for a little bit. But that was one of the things, like you guys were running a certain PBX and we have a lot of experience with different PBXs, right? Whether it's Elastic's, Free PBX, 3CX, whether our hosted thing has nothing to do with it. We have experience with all the other stuff. So we were able to help migrate, and that was, it was cool. So I did play with the UniFi stuff when it came out the very first time. And I got it working for the most part, right? You got it registered, got it making calls, got a voicemail. And then within, what did it take them? 6 months to shutter that one? And it just disappeared. And then this is what, 2 years later, a year later, they start this back up. So I don't know if I trust that.
That's how I feel about it too. And voice is one of those things that's kind of unique because you're talking about something that's got to be on someone's desk for at least an easy 5-6 year life cycle or more. I mean, I only recently threw away, I forget what they are. They're we finally decided it was enough. We had one in the corner. We had an old Cisco phone still tied to our free PBX system that was probably 10, 11, 12 years old. Works. Nothing wrong with it. We just said we don't really need the
7900s never die. Never die. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it wouldn't auto register because of some problem with free PBX and the fact that it was ancient, but whatever. Once you manually registered it, it worked.
But I'm like you though. I'm like we used to take over hospitals, and so like those 7941s and the 7901s were everywhere, or banks loved them, right? And so I know you can convert them from skinny protocol to OpenSIP, and hey, I'm a Cisco guy, I can do this. So we took 50 phones to the office. This is 5-6 years ago. Took 50 phones to the office, and we stayed up till 2 a.m. We got 3 flashed that we're able to register. And after that, we're like, went back to the client, look, we'll help you just replace the phones. We're not going to fight this battle. The phones still work if you plug them into a cube or a similar system, but yeah, some things need to go.
Yeah. I see that George says he'd like to see that list. Justin, we'll get this together sooner than later on that. We want to help vendors list. This is something me and Ray, one of the reasons we hit it off and talking so much is we're both really about not just doing things for ourselves, so to speak, but actually doing a bunch of community driven things where we want to see the community get better. I give out a ton of information on this channel. Ray's got a YouTube channel, by the way. I'll leave links to that down in the description below. And he's done some tutorial videos. He's done some different things on documentation. Even got a whole video on how to set up Hoodoo. I watched that, because I was looking at the Hoodoo documentation platform. Like that's we really want to. We're very aligned with throwing a lot more information out there. From based on our years of experience, because just like Ray, I started in the 90s doing this stuff. So if we can help people, and there's this weird concept too many people have of everything's a competition. Like, oh, this is my secret sauce. And I will link bait you into buying my book or buying my training courses. And I'm like, really, guys? Like, at some point, give a lot of it out there. In the big picture, it works really well for you. People ask, Tom, how do you get a lot of customers? I'm like, well, it turns out if you're just really nice and engage people a lot and give away a lot of information, people kind of gravitate towards you, and you end up doing pretty well. It's kind of weird. I mean, it's as if it's
right. It's like, don't be a jerk. It's not that hard. There's a book I love called They Ask You Answer, and it talks about exactly that. This guy was selling pools, and he'd start getting these questions that people would ask him about, what is this pool? What's the best? What's that? And should I get a whatever? I don't remember half like the pool jargon, but like, should I do this? And he started getting the list, and then he just started answering them in advance, putting them up on the website, putting them on the marketing materials. So anything people would ask, he'd already have those answers ready to go. Then he started reviewing other pool companies in the area, not trash talking, talking about if you're going to get a preform pool, this is the best company to do it in the area. If you're going to do this, this is the best company. And he started and it's not exactly the same thing, but that's why I do the product review videos. That's why I do like other stuff that has absolutely nothing to do with VoIP. Even though I'm very happy I can start talking about this now. There's a CP925 just got released today. I've had it for like 2 months. Couldn't talk about it. I'm sure you have a big stack of equipment like that you can't talk about yet.
I'm looking at things that are NDA that I can't drag into the.
That's how the start of every video is, right? Like move stuff off screen so nobody can see it.
Yeah, is this thing NDA? Slide it over here.
But it's fun because we get 2 Christmases, right? We get the first Christmas when we get to play with it, and then we get the second when we get to actually put our stuff out publicly. Yeah. But that's the thing. So he became the subject matter expert for those IT people and MSPs out there that are watching. Write this down. This will serve you. He started becoming the subject matter expert for pools. Period. Not just for him, for others. So people would start asking him, "What do you think about your competitor? What do you think about this?" And he never had to respond negatively. But he was the go-to guy, and that turned into getting business. It doesn't have to. You don't always have to preach, buy my stuff, buy my stuff. Set yourself up as the expert, and people will come eventually.
And someone asked me though, and I will warn this: I'm not someone who does like gatekeeping to tell you not to do it. But people are like, well, should I do YouTube? I'm thinking about getting into it. Is it a great way to build your MSP? I'm just going to start. I'm like, well, it took me several years and about 1,000 videos to get popular. So as long as you have a few years on your arc of planning on there is a lot of work that goes into doing this. But do it alongside other marketing things you have. I won't say this is the only marketing, but it is a good component of it. Is just keep building a lot of that content around it. So, especially when people always ask, because, hey, I want to start up an MSP business, and God help you if you do. But the marketing part is you may have the most amazing technical chops. You may be the most technical, best at running all of these things, best in class procedures and everything. But the marketing side, boy, that's even for me and Ray. We've been around a minute, and we'll tell you this is not easy. It's
not easy at all. I was talking to another MSP group this week, and they were asking, marketing tips and stuff like that. And I by no means have it dialed in at all. Just the opposite. Tom's always sharing information with me, saying, showing me stats and showing me things I should look at. And I'm like, I'm deeply appreciative of it. But like I was talking about the thought leadership stuff, and I was saying it should be a component of what you do, But when you're starting out and you're building, it can't be everything that you do because it takes so much of your time, right? Like you have to have other avenues of getting the word out there and stuff like that. Because while we're doing this, we can't do anything else. So we can do this because we both have staff and people that, like you've talked about, Brett, and handling the operation side and letting you do the fun stuff. I have my people, so I can do the fun stuff like this. And so, but that takes a long time to get there. You know what I mean? So, but definitely do it. I mean, if you enjoy it, go for it.
It's that old saying, half the money I spend in marketing doesn't work, but I don't know which half. I mean, I don't think there's got. And that's just the challenge
down there.
Oh, yeah.
From Ricardo Pereira.
Yeah.
Deploying on site.
I still like some of the free PBX stuff. The good and bad, and one of the reasons, honestly, the reason we're engaging with Ray is it comes down to support problems of you have to support everything that you deploy. Do you have the time to support it? Are you going to take the time to be an expert at it? And I know a few other people that offer free PBX support, and they're overwhelmed right now because they can't find enough staff to keep up with the amount of support. So it's not something you can easily outsource. You kind of have to do it a little bit in-house. The demand is really high for people that know free PBX. So as long as you think you can support it with your client, I would say go for it. But one of the reasons, like I said, I'm engaging with Ray is because Ray, with his own platform, it is very different than the way, well, similar but different. It's still phones and everything else.
Yeah,
but it's
still phone service. The client is very similar. It's the back end, right? And that's the thing. I love free PBX. I absolutely do. From a platform, from a stability, the software. There's no better way to learn something on premises or at a VM or however you do it. I love being able to dive into Asterisk and be able to figure stuff out. There's a lot of stuff you learn, but it comes to a scalability. You know, my own process, you know, I deployed between free PBX, Elastics, Vanilla Asterisk, Isabel, with good friends that were on the Isabel team. They graduated from Elastics and went over to Isabel. Fusion, like free switch. I've deployed probably thousands of on-prem or VMs, or, you know, or worked on other people's stuff in some way, shape, or form. It gets to the point after 5, 10, 15, 20, where the management of them, right? The firmware upgrades, the support, the alerting, the monitoring, you know, it gets to the point where you start to have to build orchestration systems and automation systems and monitoring systems. And then you got to start, you know, when you have upgrades, how are you going to start planning rolling upgrades? Because that's their only PBX, right? Or there are HA ways to do it where you can do active passive failover with free PBX, but even that,
it's complicated on free PBX.
It's complicated.
Yeah, I've looked at that. Someone asked me about it.
Stuff. Yeah,
it's a mess.
And by the time you get to doing all that, you start looking, and this was my path. I looked at it and I was like, I can just get a nice class 4, class 5 soft switch, whether you're working with a reseller or hosting your own or whatever, that's irrelevant. But you start saying, okay, well, hosted versus on-prem, this is why, right? And I'm saying on-prem being hosted versus a PBX appliance, whether you hosted in DigitalOcean, Vultr, Linode, whatever, or on-premises is relevant. But PBX versus hosted, you start to realize you don't have to worry about all that stuff. You know what I mean? We have multiple data centers, and I mean, with the recent VoIP apocalypse, you know, excluding that part, I got to get you the shirts. We're making the VoIPening shirts. I survived.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. But, you know, once you get to that, then you start realizing it's just too much to manage. But to learn it, go for it. I would even say don't even do an appliance. Do it on a VM, learn it.
Yeah.
It's fantastic.
My first one,
hit me up.
Yeah, my first one was on a VM that we had it when we set up the first time years ago when we started using it in the office. Because at one point in time we were on Ring Central, and when we migrated off of them, that's what we went to. It's just a VM running free PBX. I'm like, this is actually pretty easy. This is, well, it was easy to me. Training up all my staff on it when they're also doing everything else and running everything. They're like, oh, great, Tom gave something else to do. And so
well, that was the thing, right? When I was working with Eric, I'm sitting there and we were migrating you guys over, and I'm like, okay, I had to go back to my notes, and I had, because it'd been a couple of years since I played with the phone systems, the Asterisk-based phone systems, and so like I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, okay, well, I'm helping them and I'm, you know, doing this stuff. And then I'm like, well, maybe I should get one of my guys or one of my girls like on the tech teams to come help out. And I realized I'm one of the few on the team with that experience. And it's like, And that was part of the problem, because it's a complete niche thing to keep up with. It's not hard to get started and deployed. 3CX, you can be up and running in 15 minutes if you already have Windows stood up. Free PBX ISO, you can do the same thing. You can go from booting up the VM to dial tone within 30 minutes very easily with a walkthrough. But then when something doesn't work, when you have PJ-SIP fighting with ChanSIP, or you don't have configurations working, or you're getting, calls being dropped because you're allowing anonymous or not allowing anonymous, you're getting SIP scanning. That's the hard part.
Yeah.
Which is awesome to learn.
It's a great learning experience. I see a question I'll just throw an answer out real quick for. And I don't have every model number of every network card memorized, but I'm pretty sure the OHM9JY is an Intel 4-port net card. Yes, it's still a good one to use. I'll just answer that real quick for someone. I remember it's somewhere in one of the video links when I've done my PFSense videos, which, by the way, I'm working on, for those of you wondering. Yes, I'm going to do a 2021 edition. Life happened a lot. I jumped around, and me and Jay from Learn Linux TV, we do this thing every Tuesday night. We just start BSing about YouTube and vent at each other about life a little bit. But one of the things that we come up with is we need to refocus things. Is you try everything as a YouTuber. As you get bigger, you're like, I know these are videos are popular. Maybe people like it if I did these other things. But then you said yes to too many things, and there's a pile of things on your desk that you promised you do reviews for, and I kind of got caught up in that. So I've actually been working to clear my queue so I can get back to some of the popular videos I do, like on PFSense and network engineering.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? Like and you've helped me a lot with planning my video series and stuff like that. Like I want to do an OBS series, but in the meantime, I was recording stuff on the new T58Ws and the W Pro and the 925 and the 965. And there's only so much you can juggle at one time, right? Like it's sitting there, and you don't want to forsake one to get the other out. And it's tough, man. I have 20 or not 20. I probably have 5 or 6 Hoodoo videos I want to do, but I have other stuff that's more important right now I want to get out. So that's tough.
And Hoodoo's a pretty neat system. I mean, we evaluated it. I'll be doing actually some videos talking a little bit about IT documentation, hopefully in the near future. I think it's of the other ones I've looked at, and if you spend any time in the Reddit RMSP, you will see lots of talk about those documentation systems going down. It's just part of the, and if they don't go down, they slipped in a 3-year agreement somewhere. Just head over to Reddit RMSP and enjoy. Go jump in on the drama. And if you sort by time or do a search for IT documentation, about once a week there's a long heated argument about who has the best one.
I have a private Discord with some friends, and the 2.0, and we were talking about that literally minutes before we got on here about IT Glue versus Hoodoo versus Passportal versus, and it was everybody's like, this is my badge of honor, which it shouldn't be. I mean, you can't get that serious about it.
Mm-hmm.
But if you research it before you do it, you have your reasons for why you selected your product. And it's always funny to watch the heated conversations on it. No, because your product's always going down, and your product has security flaws, and there's no perfect product. Let's be real honest. There's nothing perfect. But educate yourself and pick the best one.
Yeah, pick what really fits for your workflows and things like that. And I think that's, this is something that's a fun conversation, because you see it as you go through being a more mature in the IT industry as a managed service provider and things like that. One of the things you can look back on is when I see people hopping between different tools all the time and spend a lot of time searching for the tools or complaining about a couple really small price difference between the tools. One, my payroll far exceeds my tools. That's just
right.
You figure that out real quick. And it's also, there is no perfect procedure of any of these tools. They all have their own flaws. What you really need to focus on is having clean process and procedures. No software will magic your way into being a better MSP. That's just the reality of it. You can give your techs all the best documentation, but it turns out if the techs aren't following procedures to properly update that documentation, it's as useless as no matter what. And it's
The most frequently, this is both in Discord and on the Reddit sub, the most frequently heard recommendations are you should fire your client whenever you complain or ask a question about a client, and you should switch your RMM. That is like the
Yeah.
two most popular comments. It got to the point where like we have a running meme that we switch RMMs and fire clients on Wednesday. Like
Yeah.
that's the running gag. And what people forget is it takes a lot of work. And I'm not just talking RMM, PSA, remote control, whatever you're doing. It takes a lot of work to get really proficient at these tools. And then you got to pass the knowledge on to the rest of your team. Then you got to build your processes, and then you got to handle migration, and then you got to handle updates and deployment. That, I mean, there's no tool where it takes less than 6 months to get up to speed on, regardless of the tool. And so to sit there and look at, I'm going to switch for 20 cents an agent or $1 an agent or whatever it is, it's not worth it. It really isn't.
Yeah. It's just a real challenge in there. People have asked me why, because I did some videos and we still use Enable, previously SolarWinds, and we did some videos on it, and I plan to do some more because they've changed the interface a lot. It's still in some ways the same, but there's enhancements to it. But then the comments are, well, can you review this one too and review this one? I'm like, you guys realize I have, I don't know, 50 customers in here, and then all the different sites, and then all the different computers at all these different sites. And like, I can't just switch to another one and really give you the experience. I'm just sharing with, by the way, when I share all that knowledge, there's no offer code, no nothing. The weirdest thing I got today, or you kind of think this is funny, I got this weird phone call from the VP over at SolarWinds. He says, I have no idea who you are other than you did a video about my product. And he goes, he says, I don't know how to explain or why you did it, because he says, I just want to let you know that when they check the boxes of where they found it, your name comes up, and I said, are you on the payroll? Because it was a sales meeting. He goes, who is this guy? And I thought that was hysterical. He goes, I just want to call. He's just like, he's just so on the phone with him. He's just like, this is kind of, I know what you did, but I don't understand why you did it type thing. It's kind of this conversation. And I was like, no, I just want to show people what it looked like. He goes, yeah, like 20,000 people watched that video and they're calling us.
I love that. Yeah, I get that all the time. People ask, "Oh, are you, are you? Do you have financial vesting in Hoodoo or in any of the other stuff?" Because I review other stuff regularly. I'm like, no, it's interesting, and I want to share my experience, and it's out there, and it is what it is. It's funny, after our video talking about the DDoS mitigation techniques and calling out specifically the other vendors that have those tools for VoIP, and Cloudflare did not. I got a contact from Cloudflare, and we're meeting next week to talk about it. They were actually a big component of the bandwidth mitigation. If you check the routes right now, bandwidth has Cloudflare in place. They did other stuff too. It's not just that, but Cloudflare jumped in, and now they're offering VoIP service specifically. I don't want to say because of the video, but it's in line. I mean, they're like, yeah, we saw you said we don't do this, now we're doing this, and they put out a bunch of blog posts. I thought that was pretty funny.
Yeah, it's really interesting doing some of these. That's how I came in contact with HD Moore. Was I thought Rumble was so cool when I played with it. I did a video on it, and once again they reached out to me. So you did a video on our product? Hi. It was kind of. They're like, we've gotten a lot of phone calls.
That's awesome.
It's one of these fun things that happen sometimes. So yeah. Let's see. I see people talking about switching to PFSense. By the way, there's like 140 people, but there's only 37 likes. So please smash the like button, because our lives are driven by algorithms, and we want this algorithm to let people know they should watch the video. And you feel free to ask questions. That's what me and Ray are here for. I mean, me and Ray will just babble on. We can just talk forever, but feel free to throw a few questions in here. Especially Ray's got way more VoIP experience than me. Plus he's got some enterprise networking experience. So he's going to have different answers than me on some of the things, where he's got the bigger stuff that he's played with. Oh, I did see someone ask a question about DNS rebinding on a UDM Pro. I just did a video on UDM Pro. Look, it may say pro, but that does not stand for professional. That does not stand for enterprise. Just don't expect a lot out of the UDM Pro. I didn't have enough time. Well, I could have, but it just wouldn't have been reasonable to make a list of everything the UDM Pro doesn't do. The weirdest question that has been sent to me many times on Twitter is, will the UDM Pro do BGP routing? And I'm like, what? It's a consumer thing. Why would you ask if it does BGP? Like, you're muted.
Oh. Muted. What kind of like memory would it have to hold the tables? Like it couldn't even do partial tables. No way.
I can't imagine announcing routes on a UDM. Matter of fact, until more recently, recent firmwares, it didn't even have the ability to have multiple IPs on the WAN. That was a recent upgrade to it. It released without that ability to have a block of IPs assigned to the WAN, and it's still really limited in how it functions and how the firewall rules work for it. It's not. I mean, it works, but it's just compared to some of the other equipment out there, and it's not their target either. They didn't go out to unset Juniper as the enterprise firewall. That isn't what they targeted. They have UniFi as a whole. And actually, I've got one other things because yes, I'm reviewing some of the UniFi 6s in case people are wondering. But the whole ethos they have is this concept of they want to make network engineering simpler. They want to be able to make it easier for you to deploy a segmented network with Wi-Fi across there. And I got to admit, for that functionality they have, it's a pretty, I kind of like you create a VLAN in their SDN software and it propagates to every Wi-Fi device, whether it's 2 or 200 of them. It propagates to every switch, whether it's 2 or 200, and it creates that same entry with the rules. Although the rules, if you create a new VLAN or any between them, that is the default setting, but you check the guest box and it will create restrictions. But they made it pretty easy. It's a few clicks away with a mouse and you have VLANs and distributed. So I kind of get where the UniFi is going with that, but that doesn't lend them to being the professional solution when it comes to firewalls. Are hard. There's a lot to them.
Very hard. And I think Ricardo said it perfectly. UDM Pro beats Pro. Pro equals more money. And that's the thing. Like, as you get to the bigger stuff, you have this very specialized equipment with these very specialized processors or ASICs or whatever they're using. And they're not high powered by any means. Like, you can't compare them to a PC or anything like that, but they have very purpose driven chipsets, whether it's to very quickly examine the packets, and in the VoIP world we have to look at this much more closely, because like we talked on the DDoS mitigation video, you need to examine packets quickly and pass them off very, very quickly. So usually, and the more pieces you have in the chain, the more hops you have, whether it's multiple routers or multiple filters or whatever you have, that's going to add a bit of latency. And so it gets very dangerous. There's a strategic decision you make on how much to do and when, because you're not just doing the network you control, you also have to account for the ones you don't, right? So you control your ingress egress out of your data centers, and maybe you're handling, you're announcing your routes to go out of certain POPs or whatever to be closest to whatever customer it is, or maybe you're peering with different ISPs to get on net quicker. But at the end of the day, you're still writing somebody else's internet to get to the last mile. And so you have to be very careful about, you may add half a millisecond or, 500 milliseconds of, not 500, 0.500 milliseconds of latency on your end. And that may translate 2- and 3-fold going out to the client. So you got to be very, very careful about that. So when you start getting geared, there's a reason I like certain switches. I like the Ubiquiti switches a whole lot for most of like SMB deployments.
Yeah.
I use them all the time. I have no problem with them. UniFi switching, I have no problem with them whatsoever. Even back in the day when they became toasters, I was absolutely fine with it. Make some eggs on top, you're good. No big deal.
You mean the 16-port one that overheated?
Yes, it was great. If on a cold day in Miami when it's like 60, you just put it under your desk, you're good.
Yeah.
But when you get to the bigger stuff where you need to be able to do to handle the changing paths or route reconvergence or announcing routes, you can't do this stuff. You can't hold full or partial tables on any prosumer gear. It's just impossible.
Yeah.
It would break it in a heartbeat.
Right. This is a good question, and I've not done any testing with it, but Microsoft Teams in the world of VoIP, boy, I mean, Microsoft Teams is its own. So I was in a meeting with a lot of people just the other day for this thing we do with Enable, and Microsoft Teams went a few times, and we all froze. And I'm just like, wow, I can't imagine running my VoIP through it, but I'll ask you, what do you think about running your VoIP through it?
So software wise, forget that it's currently an Electron app, forget that it's a resource hog, forget that it will slow down your computer. Software wise, Teams is one of the most reliable soft phones I've seen, period. I begrudgingly went to Teams from Slack last year. I miss Slack dearly, but Teams, because of the ecosystem stuff, it works great. And as a phone, even as a soft phone on your cell phone or on your PC, it works really, really well. The application works really, really well. As a service, that's the part I take issue with. So I like I don't want Cortana and ads in my calls.
That's
Could
a
you
real.
imagine getting your call interrupted, like when you do a PC installation,
Hi,
and
this is
Cortana
Cortana.
interrupting your call? Let me go over your schedule. No, leave me alone. So no, as it is, you get that, like, you finish a Teams call and you get that, how was the call quality? Well, I do 60 or 70 calls a day, or Teams meetings. So I see that screen 60 or 70 times a day. Oh, it drives me bonkers. You can imagine. So whatchamacallit. So the thing with Teams is, we use Teams. We've used Teams internally since March of last year. However, we pair it with our own VoIP service. And I'm not saying this to pitch OITVoIP. If you're going to use Teams for your phone application, I'm absolutely all for that. Pair it with a VoIP provider that does what's called direct routing. Direct routing allows us to use our connections, our phone switches. So when you're hosted, it's called a phone switch. It's a soft switch. We talked about it in the other videos. So we do the advanced call routing, we do the call recording, we do the auto attendance, the music on hold, the call queues, the advanced stuff, the resiliency and high availability that Teams can't do. We handle all that, and then we just feed the call into Teams. So when Microsoft 327 goes out, as per the usual, it's not a big deal because you can still get it on your soft phone app using the non-Team stuff. You can still have a desk phone that's open SIP if you like Yealink, Grandstream, Poly, whatever, and still use Teams if you're using on a desk. Teams is my daily driver. I just don't trust Microsoft with the service side of it. Too many stories of, actually, Teams had an outage today. Too many stories of
They have a lot of outages.
friends that, a lot of outages, and they're slow to communicate, and that's the dangerous part. When the bandwidth stuff was going on, we were notifying our Discord within 20 minutes. Microsoft is routinely 2 and 3 hours behind any kind of outage doing notifications. And whether it shows up in your Outlook or shows up in the admin portal or whatever, or if you need to get on the phone and talk to somebody and say, hey, my port's taking 6 months, what's going on? That's a real story. That's not exaggeration. There's nobody to talk to. It's all portal, period. That's too much to rely on for most people. We saw the last couple of weeks, people without their phone service, it's too much to put on a company that can't respond to a phone call.
Yeah.
So yes, use Teams. Don't use Teams voice service.
Yeah, makes sense to me. We have a super chat, and so Vincent wants to know, what is the best alternative for PFSense with almost the same functionality with their package and other stuff? I don't really have an alternative for PFSense that's free. The two I talk about here is Untangle and PFSense. Untangle is got a paid version because people like the filtering and things like that. I think it's a great. We actually have this deployed for businesses that really dive into. They need all those. I call them the employee surf reports. That's from the old surfing the web and things like that. So it's kind of cool. They got a lot of reporting on there, a lot of filtering, but it's obviously that comes all that filtering and the feeds that come into it come at a price. If you like OpenSense for whatever reason, I don't use it, but that's it's also a BSD. It's a fork of PFSense, but my preference is to use PFSense. I don't really know why you wouldn't want to use it, but if it's because it's missing the filtering packages, I get that, and that's one of the reasons that we do a lot of Untangle. We're officially a Untangle reseller, but you can also buy it direct if you're doing it for a home. Man, they have a pretty reasonable price for their home user stuff. It's like $150 a year, and you get quite a few features with it. You get all their threat feeds, you get their web filtering package, you get all their tagging. It's a fairly intuitive interface too for a lot of people. Like, a common request is home users go, I need to block the kids from going here or going there and filter the internet. Untangle is kind of a good system for that. So hopefully that answers the question there on that. Then someone had a question for Ray. I just asked
you that question the other day. I messaged you. That was one of the questions. I said, I want to replace my home router. What's your recommendation?
Yeah.
And it was PFSense very quickly.
So this one's for Ray. Is a question for Ray, fairly new tech super noob, aspirations to eventually get into building enterprise networks. How do you start in that? And I don't know if there's any way you can skip the help desk part of your life, but if you can't.
Well, first I want to call out Brandy. Awesome. As the father of a daughter in tech, she grew up and she decided to go into tech, and she grew up into it. And now she's one of my most experienced project managers. We don't have enough women in the industry, so thank you, first of all. Second of all, that's one of the reasons we started going the JNCIA route, or JCNCIA. I don't the Juniper route. Yeah. They have free training. you can actually go to Juniper, and here's the here's the real catch: whether it's Dell or Palo or Juniper or Cisco, the concepts are the same. Okay,
Yeah.
layer 1 through 7 is exactly the same for everybody. You know, the concepts are going to be the same. So what training you get is absolutely relevant. I would strongly recommend, and you're going to have to spend a lot of personal time doing this. I would strongly recommend go do the Juniper set. They have their version of CCNA, but it's absolutely free with labs. The only thing you have to pay for is the actual test. The test, they give you a voucher for the test after you do the training, and the test is like $100. And that gets you the Juniper equivalent of a CCNA. That's a great way to start doing that. You have to start building those things with enterprise networking. It is one of those things that they're going to want to see you have experience at. So you're going to go through the levels, right? You're going to do the NA, NP, or over and over, all the way up the rungs. And my thing is, I'm a big fan of apprenticeships. I'm a big fan of finding somebody doing what you want to do and spend as much time as possible with them. Get them to teach you, get them to show you what they're doing. I'm where I am today because I was with somebody when I was 8 years old. I was in a program called Big Brothers Big Sisters, where my big was an IBM engineer, and he would take me to his jobs working on these mainframes, these AS400s and satellite communications and stuff like that. Stuff I have my 8-year-old son today, I wouldn't let him touch in a million years. But, that's the reason I'm here today. So it's a lot of apprenticeship. You're going to, as much as nobody wants to do the help desk, I think you have to do it.
Yeah.
It's part of the logic, the problem solving process, part of the customer service process. We all know the back room knock engineers, they're not spending a lot of time doing customer service. Absolutely not. But you have to do your steps, right? You have to pay your dues. And the thing that you miss when you work on the big enterprise side on the back end, you miss the last mile stuff. The help desk helps you with the last mile stuff. So
understanding
you start
how the users are using it is and how they interact with it is kind of an important aspect to make sure you understand.
And something the help desk teaches you that no amount of classroom or online training or knock experience is ever going to teach you is hearing people explain problems in a non-technical fashion that you have to translate to technical. The only place you're going to get that experience is the help desk. Hearing somebody say, it's the equivalent of taking your car to the mechanic and hearing somebody say, my car goes doom, doom, doom every time I turn left, right? The mechanic's got to figure out, what does that mean? The help desk is the only place you're going to get that experience. And that's going to help you when you work with others, because not everybody you work with at the higher levels is going to have the same training and background as you. So they may explain something in a different way. You're going to have to translate and say, oh, he's talking about prefixes. He's talking about, black holing around. They're talking about whatever. That's going to help you. It's going to serve you eventually.
Yeah. It's, and end users are just part of it. It's something we all had to do at one time. I think back to some of the help desk stuff, and I don't mind. Like I jump in and to this day will help anything that's going on here at the office. And if someone walked in the door and my staff are busy, I will go up to the counter, and that's because we still have walk-ins, even though we don't officially do retail anymore. People still wander in, and so
do they ever walk in and like recognize you and be like, "Oh, wait, you're that guy. You're the guy on YouTube."
So yeah, that actually happens because they stop by because they know who I am and our address is public. So yes, that does occasionally happen. So they're sometimes surprised I'm the one that comes out there, like, because they don't realize that right behind this wall is where the lobby is, and so there's a door off to the side here. So when you see someone on the camera back here, they're literally standing on the other side of the TV, and I just open the door and say hi. So
that's awesome. That's fun, right? It's like going into the Magic Kingdom and like seeing Mickey pop out and be like, hey, what's up? So that's pretty cool.
Open question. You have any issues with PFSense and UniFi switches in terms of configuration? Actually, one of the things, I might do a follow-up video because I tweeted about a warehouse we did. I like to do follow-ups on some of the deployments. That particular job did have problems, and this is a issue with the UniFi, certain models of their access points. Not a problem with their switches, but their access points. They handle DHCP in a way that is weirdly incompatible with SonicWall. So we don't really understand what we know if you Google SonicWall, UniFi, and DHCP, you'll find tons of forum posts about it. But when it comes to PFSense and setting them up, we haven't experienced, because that's what made it harder to troubleshoot those problems. Is before we ran into a couple jobs where the clients insisted, because they already had the firewalls, that we come in and do all the work. We come in and set the switches up in the VLAN, do it all configuration based on their guidelines, but they insisted they're going to use SonicWall, and then all of a sudden DHCP wouldn't work. Now, the weird thing is you can statically assign devices and connect to the Wi-Fi. They work perfectly fine. It just wouldn't DHCP. But when it comes to using PFSense with all the UniFi stuff, I've absolutely found it to be butter. Like, it works really, really smooth and untangled, because we've got a handful of deployments of both of those. I have had zero issues at all. And I'm sure, because I think, I'm trying to remember if it was Willie Howe. He has another channel as well. He does some of the Juniper stuff too. I believe he told me Juniper works with fine, which makes sense, because Juniper, being BSD based, probably uses exactly the same service stack. So I don't have any problems that you'll have with them using PFSense. It seems to work. It's very standards based. My guess is, because SonicWall being the odd one out, and I'm not a SonicWall fan, SonicWall does something weird with the DHCP, would be my guess. So
yeah, I'd love to see those PCAPs to see what's going on, because we used to use SonicWall a lot more back in the day. Especially when they had their SecAs program, it was actually pretty decent on the MSP side until we had issues with some stuff, so we stopped. But there's always SonicWall quirks that I've given speaking engagements at SonicWall peak conferences for talking about using SonicWall and VoIP, because for the longest time those were bad words to put together, right? It's like saying Candyman 3 times. So, but I was giving speeches on, like, or presentations on, no, this works. These are the gotchas. These are what you have to look out for, and I've done them in enterprise deployments and stuff like that. Micro enterprise, right? Like 5,000, 10,000 users, nothing massive, but and they work. It's just a matter of tweaking. But like you said, not my go-to anymore. What I mean? There's other better tools out there. So
there's nothing compelling about a SonicWall that makes you like them. And I've even watched a few people in a couple of forums who I know are big SonicWall resellers also rant on how long it took service to help them with something. And I'm like, I don't really ever have to contact PFSense. And we've done some really complicated configs for clients, complete tie-ins with their Active Directory, authentication, everything with PFSense, and it worked fine. We never even had to call the help desk to get it working. But anyways, this probably applies not just to PFSense, but to other ones too, like the best practices for VoIP quality. And the one thing with PFSense is they have a wizard that sets up traffic shaping, and they ask you for the VoIP provider you're using and what the fully qualified domain name is for the VoIP. So whatever point of presence you are, probably the closest one. PFSense makes that pretty easy, and it will do queuing and traffic shaping for that. I have a video on how to do coddle queue with it. I haven't really dove into a traffic shaping video. I need to probably reach out to, there's a YouTuber who's been around a while. He does not very many videos anymore, but he has one of the best videos on PFSense traffic shaping, not because of the content he does about the traffic shaping. He's got an entire graphics that he did to show how queue buckets work and how each one and all the calculations, it's complicated. He really took the time. He created animations of how the packets need to be reassembled in order. And he explains coddle queuing. He explains that in a way that I can't. So I may ask him if I can just borrow his graphics and make a new version of the video. His video, it's Mark Furman on traffic shaping. If you look it up, and the guy did a brilliant job. He did a few PFSense videos, but they're old. I mean, it's the old interface. They're like 4 years ago, but the graphics that he did, I thought about just, I don't know if I want to hire an animator or just ask Mark if I can use his. I just want to redo it to the new video, because I've linked to it in my video. I'm like, but traffic shaping is a big part of VoIP.
Yeah, it's so I'm mixed on this, and this is one of the other reasons I prefer hosted. We do all the heavy lifting on the back end, right? Like we have our own SBCs, we do our own translations, so we make sure like stuff like SIP ALG and other stuff, like we can go TLS if we need to, that kind of fun stuff, to avoid double natting and whatever BS. But my thing is, on the client side, there's a time and a place, but I'm probably the most known for saying there's no such thing as QoS on the internet from the client side. It doesn't exist. All you're doing is I'm sending traffic, say I'm the endpoint inside the office and, Tom's the router. I'm sending stuff to Tom, and Tom is deciding what to send out first and what to take in first. That's all traffic. That's all, QoS is when a lot of these routers do it, regardless of brand. The problem that happens is, remember I talked about when we add filtering, we add all this stuff, you're introducing a delay, and there's nothing Tom can do in the world if you're getting too much coming into you from the outside. There's nothing that Tom can do, right? So when you're talking about QoS and traffic shaping and prioritization policies and stuff like that, most switches, most layer 2, layer 3 switches, they already honor DSCP markings, right? The express forwarding, the 46, that's set by default. Most phones already have that set by default. It's a standard thing, so they're going to honor that. You can set up queuing if you have a lot of. Where I really see the need is if you have a lot of switches that are stacked. You have a lot of switches where you have multiple connections. When you're building out a network that has multiple departments, or a big campus or something like that, what you pass from one switch to the other, right? Whether you're doing your aggregation layer, your core layer, whatever layer, that stuff, you absolutely have to have that queuing in place, because you may only have a 2 gig uplink, right? Or you may only have a 10 gig uplink, but you're doing hundreds or thousands of users. If you're doing a flat network or a couple of VLANs and it's 1 or 2 switches, I wouldn't sweat the small stuff. Most of our deployments, I say, don't even bother with QoS. Do VLAN if it makes you happy. Security. VLAN's not security, but you get what I'm saying. But segregate your traffic. I'm all for that. I absolutely do it. It's not one of the things I've been a hard ass about, because there's only so much on a small network it's really going to make a difference.
And I've said this a few times in numerous videos. I get paid a lot of money to reset things to default for people. And this is one of the problems. They come in heavy trying to overcomplicate it. Honestly, turn it all on. Don't change anything. Don't even go into the traffic shaping configuration. Start making some phone calls. Does it work? Stop. Right there. It works.
That's it. You're done. That's it. And it's funny because you talk to IT people and they're like, okay, so I have this firewall and what settings do you want me to do? And I'm like, stop. Yeah. Like, okay, yes, set some routes. So like, you're only accepting 50, 60 and only, from our SIP servers and stuff like that, or our POPs, you want to start filtering that stuff so you don't get the SIP scanning, and that happens all the time, the ghost calls. You want to start setting that, or you want to start setting your failover policies. So if you have a 4G LTE failover, only VoIP and only stuff to your enterprise applications go through the failover. Anybody else, you're not going to get Spotify where you're on failover. Too bad. Yeah. You want to set that stuff? Absolutely. Usually the biggest thing I see on any firewall period, on any router period, is turn SIP ALG off. For the love of all that's holy, turn SIP ALG off. It's like the bane of my existence. And 2, a lot of providers, remember, most providers are using UDP for VoIP. UDP is a connectionless protocol, right? I'm shouting, you're shouting. Neither of us knows if the other one's done shouting. It's not TCP. You don't get your handshake. So what happens is most firewalls will have a timeout to which they'll see the connection open, and if they don't see any traffic that goes through, they'll drop the connection. Well, phones re-register every 60 seconds. They send a refresh every 60 seconds. Most UDP timeouts on firewalls are 30 seconds. So the thing we do the most often is set a route to using your firewall rules or whatever you need to do, and change the UDP timeout for our specific connections to our POPs. Set that to 90 seconds so that you have time for refresh. You don't drop a call. That's it. Other than that, it's not complicated.
Yeah, and don't overcomplicate it. That's the biggest problem. Don't turn just because there's a lot of knobs. Don't press them all. XCPNG question: are you aware of any way to isolate VMs network-wise, similar to private VLANs on a switch? Absolutely. I've talked about this in a few of my XCPNG videos. If you go to Lawrence.technology, that's not my main website, Lawrence Systems. That's where we organize all the tutorials. And there's a whole section on XCPNG. I believe there's one about building labs in there. One of the cool things now is they have not just VXLAN support, but GRE support, encrypted GRE. You can build not just private networks. You can have like one public facing IP and build a series of them that tie between multiple physical hosts, or even go a step further. You can go wild with it and have it between data centers. And you can have private networks that your VM's attached to that are also encrypted tunnels with IPsec over to other networks. They give you some really cool tools to use Zen Orchestra to organize a whole lot of hosts or even separate clusters and pools together with private networking. So it's not just supported, it's supported in a really advanced way. And they've actually gone a step further. I don't know if Ray, are you familiar with Netbox?
Yeah, absolutely.
So
For
they
IPAM?
integrated Netbox because
Yep.
Netbox allows for IP management and documenting. There's a couple of projects they talk about them over on the blog at XCP&G, and we've worked with a couple of these. It's being used in data centers, and to be able to manage all the IP pools and things like that, they've started building tie-in with the Netbox software. So you can even do restrictions on what public IPs can be assigned, but then you can build all your stack as a series of private IPs behind one public IP handed out. So yes, you can go wild with it. It's one of the cool enterprisey features.
That's awesome. I have to call out. I see somebody here. They were talking about our camera qualities, and I take a lot of pride. I'm blown out right now in the background. I have to put up blackout curtains. I just haven't had the time. My wife is telling me in chat. She's like, "This is the first webinar you're on where the other person has a better camera quality than you do." So my wife's calling me out here. But I saw somebody had asked about the equipment. I know you have videos on your streaming gear, especially when you moved into when you redid your space, right? Like that was awesome. But somebody had asked what capture cards you're using. I know you don't want to get into full gear, but you want to talk about what capture card you're using?
I already forgot. But I will pull that up really quick though, because if you go to kit.co/launch systems, and it should be under, I'll throw it on the screen in a second once I pull it up. So it should be in my parts list. I have I did a video and I talked about the capture cards, but they're the Elgato. I have one AverMedia still. Elgato 4K60. That's the one.
It's the big brother to this one. I got the HD 60. Actually, this is a newer one. You just got the 4K version. Yeah. I have a ton of Elgato gear here. I have to play with, including the new. I use the MK2, but the XL. But I have a Stream Deck Mini. I want to do some videos on too. But yeah. You have the built-in card. I have the USB-C. Yeah.
Yep, I have all the. Actually, I got to take this one out. I still have it. We just don't really do it as much. When we were doing, I rearranged the studio, so we can't do this anymore. When we were doing like the how they get hacked videos, and a couple other ones, we would line up microphones all setting in front of us, because that way we could all look at the camera and all have our own mic. So we had a mixer. Mm-hmm. The mixer physically is still here. We just aren't doing that anymore. But yeah, I have all the different gear I use. This is the camera I'm using, the Canon EOS. I keep my kit.co links are pretty much in all of my videos. That it covers all kinds of things. And then embedded in kit.co is then the video that references. It's cycle. The video references kit, and then the kit references the video. So which way you land on it, you can figure all this out.
It's this Inception thing going on. Yeah, I'm using an AverMedia. One of the ones with it's an AverMedia capture card here, because I prefer to use PCI cards when I can. So I'm using that, and it has the 4K pass through. It's beautiful. I love it. I don't think, with the most of this gear, I don't think, and I have to say this knowing you have better video quality than I do right now, it's the blowout. I'm sorry, guys, drive me nuts. But whatchamacallit, the capture card really doesn't make that big of a difference on the video quality. Within reason, right? I mean, you don't have to go crazy on that for good video quality. Is that your opinion, Tom?
Yeah, and for what we're doing, I'm just gonna be honest. You didn't come here to look at us. You came us to hear our voice. You wanted to hear a real articulate thing. So, I mean, don't overspend on the camera. Do spend good on microphone and audio quality. If you're doing tutorials, make sure your screen captures are good. I'm sitting here talking from behind a real expensive studio camera, but it took a long time before I got
the end of the world. Yeah. No. Well, yeah, I mean, like I watched a lot of the guys like Gerald Undone and those guys. I love their content. They're the first ones to tell you, get an A5100, 6100. I'm moving from an A5100 to a 6400. Neither one being fantastic, but for streaming stuff, yeah. And actually, who was it? Ricardo, again, hit the nail on the head. It's the color balancing. I was playing with LUTs before I got online. I just ran late on time. LUTs can help you, but good lighting, better sound, that's all that really matters.
Yeah. There's actually a video I recommend. I think it's all of 10 minutes long, and it's Casey Neistat's Guide to Filmmaking. And I like he's got a very realistic approach he has to it, where he holds up some crappy cameras and he's like, "This is what I filmed my HBO special that I got paid lots of money for on." And then he walks you to a series of really inexpensive cameras, and then he talks about like, there's 3 million views on a video I did with this crappy camera that was like $100. And
Wow.
he's so much about the content. And I think some of my older PFSense videos, they were filmed with a C920 camera that you can go pick up for $49 webcam, and a Yeti microphone that is out of camera still, but I have this attached to my computer. It's not what we're recording on right now. But that Yeti microphone combined with the C920, some of those videos have like 400,000 or 500,000 views. Like, you can't get much lower budget than that, but it comes down to the content.
It's the content, right?
Mm-hmm. Unless you just want to be a pretty face on camera, then get a really good one. If you have no content this year, you just want to be a pretty face and show things off or be artistic, then, and show beautiful scenery, then you do need to have a good camera. So I guess you got to probably start a little bit of qualifier of the goal.
If you want to see a beautiful, beautiful setup, and this is, and I, like I said, I follow Gerald Dunn, I follow Equals Fox, I follow a bunch of people. He's wild. I love him. His content is phenomenal. Alpha Gaming is another one. He has great camera content, audio content. But we did a Cisco event where we did Tech Bar as the close of the Cisco event, and we were honored to be part with these guys from Neft Vodka. And they have a YouTube channel. It doesn't have a ton of followers, but if you get a chance, go follow them. They have a Neft After Dark show every week that is phenomenal. And their production quality, I mean, it is TV quality on YouTube. They have transitions, they have sets, they have the quality is just like, I was talking to Sean, I'm like, that's the goal right there. And to give you an idea, this is the Logitech face cam, or not the Logitech, this is the Elgato face cam. You see much wider. It's not framed properly, but all that really matters, the difference is the saturation, the detail. I still prefer having a DSLR personally. But I have a 920 here. I just use it for a side shot. Actually, right now it's working on my 3D printer, so I can't use it right now.
Yeah, this question comes up a lot, and I've got some videos where I compare OpenVPN and WireGuard. It depends is the answer, and I also kind of a rant of why you shouldn't use WireGuard, and I cited some pretty good reasons. The fact that it doesn't have a whole user management system, and I get WireGuard's the new fancy thing, so people like to ask about it. But dive into those videos because I don't rant, but I make some pretty strong arguments because a few other people said the same thing, like saying WireGuard, it has way less code than OpenVPN. I'm like, it doesn't have a user management system. They just kind of rely on someone else to implement that. Oh, yeah, I guess that's why I can't just use it. Because we had someone approach us, another business, and they got caught up in the WireGuard being exciting, and then they realized, oh, there's not like a user manager. I'm like, no, you can't just convert your PFSense WireGuard from PFSense with OpenVPN and having a radius server and authentication over to WireGuard. It's not a flip a switch and change the protocol. It's completely different. It works in a different premise. So yeah, it really. That's one of those questions that comes up a lot, but search those two search terms on my YouTube channel, and I explain that in more in depth.
What's your how are you still feeling on Tailscale? You still bullish on that?
I still like that. Yeah. We still haven't deployed it. We have a lot of comments from people that told me they did deploy it. Some were on that video. A few people reached out to me, and I think someone posted my forums about it. It seems to be that it works really well overall. Like, no one really had any complaints about it. So I'm thrilled, and I may do some videos on NAT because, man, I love their NAT write-up. It is like 100 pages of everything you ever wanted to know about NAT traversal. And so and that earlier how we were talking about, if you create a lot of good content and people start talking about you all of a sudden, and they have some great engineering information on their blog, unrelated to Tailscale. It's just how they solved all the NAT problems.
They're phenomenal.
Yeah. So I think Tailscale is a really solid product overall. It's probably the easiest way to manage WireGuard, hands down. I mean, I did the video on it, and I was like, this just works.
Well, we had done that. Yeah, you had told me about it just after we did the Hot Shots video, and so I went, I researched it. I was just as impressed as you were, especially their documentation. You don't see companies that start doing stuff and have like amazing documentation right up front. So we deployed it. We have it deployed out through our enterprise. We use it for management. It was very easy to get on board. I like that they're trust no one by default. So, even if you install an agent on somebody else, they can't reach you unless you explicitly permit it. And I think that's great. The ACLs aren't the hardest thing in the world. It's JSON. It's not the hardest thing in the world to do. It's pretty. You throw it in VS Code and the formatting will take care of itself. But I really like it. We've been using it for, what was that, 4 or 5 weeks ago, I think at this point. We did our hot shots. So I've been using it for a month and change and very happy with it.
Yeah, it's a solid product. Just because the people that needed the help, we knew about the solution. Well, I think the solution existed before. Zero tier, which is different. They solve things on a different way, but it works in function because it's an overlay network. It works very functionally how WireGuard works. The way Tailscale has WireGuard, it's not exactly VPN, but it's creating these overlay networks so you can have this private network between a lot of nodes. And zero tier is still a good choice too, but it comes down to how you want to solve it. I actually think, and I have a video where I dive into specifically just talking about those overlay networks. I think these overlay networks are one of those management tools that we're going to see a ever growing popularity in. And I actually have a little bit of inside information because I'm friends with Ryan Huber, who is the CEO of Divine. They're the company behind Nebula, and Nebula is what Ryan, he works for Slack. They built out Slack with the Nebula product, and he is swamped. Me and him chat on Twitter and things like that. The company's doing very well, and he said there's a lot of other, once they kind of did that whole write-up of how we did it at Slack, that's a feather in your hat. Slack's a pretty big company.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. Yeah.
They solved it, and they're like, it's kind of that whole thing is like, yeah, we can solve it for you too. And so he said they can't talk about it publicly, but just in general, they've been very busy because it solves how do I get to all my equipment in a very secure way without publicly exposing a bunch of things. And the way the protocols work and the frameworks work that control these overlay networks, they're very quiet. You don't see them. You're not like looking and seeing a bunch of ports open you don't realize it's there, and it really reduces the attack surface. And Nebula, all of them, is one of the harder ones to use. It's very focused on DevOps. It's probably the hardest one to deploy. It was the hardest one to make the video on for sure.
But I like that though, because especially in the MSP space where we're talking about RMMs getting compromised or being an attack vector, right? Or, whether it's your control, whatever you're using for remote control or whatever. Suddenly we can start putting these devices they don't have to think about establishing connections or whatever they're doing to their home base. If you can do it over these private connections, it adds that extra layer of security that I really like. And we're doing stuff like CDR transport and and some of our other monitoring. We're now pushing that over the NICs, the virtual NICs that are created by Tailscale, just because it solves so many challenges, and it's working really great.
Yeah,
70 milliseconds good for VoIP. I'm sorry.
No, that's a good one. I was just going to click on it.
It's so hard not to. I'm sorry.
No, please. That's why I'm clicking on these. So
yeah. So I'm gonna share in the chat. I have a VoIP glossary with what's good and what's bad, and these are all universal. These are not like only us kind of things.
Send me in a private message because it probably won't let you actually post a link in chat. I think YouTube banned links in chat.
Oh, okay.
I'll drop it in though. Send it to me through private.
Okay. Yeah, I put it in the chat. So goal is under 50. 30 to 50, you're fine. 50 to 70, you'll hear some kind of signal. You'll hear some kind of something that the call won't sound great. But if you're sub 100, you'll still have an intelligible call. At the 100 millisecond mark, you will start seeing the call will be unusable after the 100 millisecond mark. When we start building stuff out, we do VoIP tests. We want to start looking. It's under latency, I think. And we have numbers there. We have values there for jitter and packet loss and the codecs and the different fun stuff. But yeah, under 50 milliseconds is preferable, and 100 milliseconds is usable. So you do a quick VoIP test, and nowadays speedtest.net, whatever, they have packet loss, jitter, latency, and MOS-score, which are the four horsemen of or LG detectors. Those are the four horsemen of VoIP. They can tell you on a quick speed test.
70 is good for a walkie-talkie. Not wrong.
Walkie-talkies have great audio compression too, so I'm not going to knock a walkie-talkie.
Yeah. Yeah, there's Ray's got a lot of good, I dropped that link in the chat there. There's a lot of good articles you wrote on there. Hey, we didn't just suggest how we do some of our marketing. We kind of revealed it. Like I just mentioned, hey, there's several videos I have on several of the questions that get asked here. So.
Oh yeah, and it's the stuff that comes up, and I use my own docs all the time. Like that was the thing I was saying when I was like working with Eric to like convert your PBXs, transfer the stuff over. I had to go back and double check stuff. Now I will say, like you were saying when we were talking about the question for Brandy, it is fun every once in a while to go step back into the help desk and go flex those technical muscles, right? Like to sit there and like, oh yeah, I remember doing this and this was fun. I told people I feel bad for everybody that was affected by the VoIP MS stuff. But I was telling people that was my most enjoyable week just because I got to work on all these systems I don't normally work on. And it was fun for me. We do this stuff because it's fun, right? Like we enjoy playing with the toys. So
yep, for sure. Now, something that I realize we have in here, but let's bring it up. We have the word Meraki in the title somewhere. And you have some opinions on Meraki. One of my staff actually wanted to join. He goes, "Oh, can I rant with him on Meraki?" I don't really touch it much, but a few of my staff do, and they have some choice words of how much they don't like it. I've said I don't like it, but I've actually avoided it. I'm like, oh, look, there's a Meraki thing that we need. We have a couple of clients that we do co-managed IT, and they happen to have it. So we're not a rip and replace type of IT MSP where when we do like a co-managed work, we'll let them keep their stack provided it's rational. And Meraki's it's not the best, not the worst for what they wanted to do.
It works,
but it works. But some of the multiple VPN stuff, I know my staff was ranting about not working properly. So
yeah,
what are some of the issues you see with it?
So, well, for one, they did have their own VoIP service. I think that died too, right? But they did have their own VoIP service.
I think it's on life support. They don't push anymore, but they still support it because at least if they can make money off selling the contract, they'll keep doing it. I don't see it advertised anymore though.
And they're just reselling Telnix anyway, so it's not the end of the world. So my thing with Meraki is it's the easy button of VoIP. And I'm not against that. There's a lot of things like SonicWall is notorious for if you don't use the wizard, if you don't use the wizard, you're going to break something. That's just SonicWall works that way. It's a pain in the butt. Meraki, unfortunately, it's all wizard, right? Like one of my gripes, and one of the reasons I personally use a lot more Ubiquiti gear or Edge gear than I use UniFi gear. I'm a CLI guy. I love the CLI. That's my happy place. UniFi, if you've ever played with CLI, the minute you do something on the UI, you're going to wipe it. And it's just one of those things. And it's not bad because UniFi gives you a lot of controls. You can, do things as needed, right? Set up. It does support BGP. Actually, there's some Edge gear that supports BGP. So whatever. You can do things. Meraki hides so much from you, in my opinion. If you're just you want to ship something to a client, have them plug it in and it just works, and you don't have highly technical resources on staff, and you have no intention of having highly technical resources on staff, Meraki is an acceptable solution because chances are your networks aren't going to be complicated. Now, the minute you start doing multi-site VPNs where you may have overlapping LAN segments, right? Or you may have multiple VLANs per client site, or you may have to have certain sites being able to connect over certain traffic on one segment and then another set of sites using a whole separate VPN tunnel, and the two tunnels can't talk to each other. Meraki is the wrong place. One of the last times I touched Meraki, you can't have multiple VPN tunnels that don't know about each other. That doesn't exist. Whereas anybody who does any kind of, multi-site routing with VPNs, that's a common thing. That is absolutely normal. And those kind of tools, like we've had issues where VoIP, right? And I say VoIP, remember I'm a network engineer. It's just my current thing is VoIP. But we've had where, for the most part, most firewalls, most routers, you're plug and play with VoIP. You plug it in, you're good to go. However, Meraki used to push out updates on their own, and you couldn't control them. And they're making the judgment that they have all the decisions made. They know what they're doing, and they'd push, and something would break. And you couldn't turn off SIP ALG. This was a couple of years ago, but it's not the case today. Today, you can control updates and stuff like that and centrally manage them. But it was frustrating because if you knew what you were doing and you knew what you needed to fix, you couldn't do that. Plus, on the Meraki side, I have a big problem with if you stop paying licensing, the thing's a brick. I have a major problem with that. You don't let me update. Okay, unless it's security. I think security should always be updatable. But um, if I'm not paying for current licensing, don't let me get new firmware versions. I'm absolutely okay with that. Don't tell me I can't reconfigure a switch because I stopped paying for the licensing. That I have a hard stance against.
Yeah, just and the licensing is another thing. And I don't know, maybe you'll consider this a dick move because I did do this once. We were competing, and the person who was competing and offering a Meraki bid kind of ranting a little bit about Ubiquiti is just junk, and those guys don't really know what they're doing. And specific, not talking about Ubiquiti doesn't know what they're doing, specifically us, because our bid was obviously substantially less. And well, I had actually retorted to them. I said, well, how much is your commission on it? Are you willing to forego your commission that you make on that recurring licensing fee? And the person that was kind of intersecting the bid goes, you guys make commission on the licenses? And I was like, oh, he didn't tell you about that? And it was like a really, but if you want to banter with me like that.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, but that's the thing. Like, it's something the client's not going to consider that, like, if they stop paying the licensing, they have to swap gear. Right.
Mhm.
So do I pay for the 3-year enterprise protect, or do I pay for, buy a new switch or firewall at the end of the year?
In the school that we helped get off of that, in the end, they did go with Ubiquiti. They were happy. Their licensing fee was $20,000 a year. They were spending a fortune, and it's just like, it was so much money, and they're like, this just seems like a lot of money to be spent. I'm like, it is. It's not. It doesn't seem like a lot. It's a lot for your licensing to keep the Wi-Fi up and running. And then they were pitching, well, Meraki has next day air, and I'm like, well, for one Meraki, I can buy 3 of these. So how about you just buy extra? And they're like, that seems like an easier solution. I said, you don't have to wait next day air then.
And that's the thing, like, especially in the enterprise, in the data center space, right? Like, it is very common to have 2 or 3 cold spares sitting in the rack ready to go. That is a normal process. And we do it. We all our data centers, we have extra servers just sitting dark, and extra hard drives, and extra everything, because in engineering you have at least 3 of everything, plus their backup. And so, and that's the big difference between SMB and enterprise, right? When you're building enterprise stuff, I'm not buying 1 of something. I need to cost buying 3 or 4 of something, right? So those pricing models make a big difference. Now, if I say I got to spend licensing on the HA pair, and then I got to have a redundant backup, cold storage or whatever, and I need to keep those licenses going for a device I may never use in the next 3 years before a hardware refresh. In data center space, 3 years is not hardware refresh; it's like 5 or 10 years, but whatever. But I don't want to pay for a license for something that's
Just to
going to
hang
be
out.
useless.
Yeah.
Just to hang out.
I
And a lot of the bigger partners, they have a much cheaper license when you're buying an HA pair, or they just account for it as part of the model, because they know you're just going to buy 2 devices anyway. That's just the norm.
yeah, it's part of how the business model works. I've heard a lot of people complain about this. I've seen someone mention doing SD-WAN over Meraki. I have heard that their SD-WAN is not a full seamless solution. I don't. Have you experienced it all, or?
I have not seen it myself. SD-WAN QoS over public internet, HD, 5G, overused terms, and they
Yes.
don't always mean the same thing to everybody.
I did a video explaining
true.
that one too, because it doesn't. It's such a buzzword. SD-WAN's a buzzword, and then I dive into what the different types of SD-WAN are, and then you go, wait, how does one word mean 2 things? I'm like, yeah, exactly my point. You have to then qualify what type of SD-WAN you're talking about.
If I have a friend that builds stuff, and we all have these people we look up to as like, wow, that's the brilliant person. And I have this friend I look up to where he has it set up where he has it automated, checking latency and checking packet loss over multiple hops, and if it reaches certain thresholds, it'll change the announcements on the community string so that it will start announcing its routes on different pops by itself. That is SD-WAN, people. Okay. I guarantee you what Meraki is doing is not SD-WAN. That is not the same thing. If you could take 1 box and turn it into 15 boxes, make them act as 1 device, and then change what they're doing and have them change routing automatically, and you have orchestration, and that is SD-WAN. What I guarantee, when Meraki, you can't even fine tune a VPN, that's not SD-WAN.
Yeah, that's a very different thing. There's a question I'll get back to, and this is a few people have asked me about this. I have not checked it out yet, I don't know if you have Mesh Central for having self-hosted RMM and not relying on third-party servers. There's a couple of projects I know people are working on, like an open source RMM. I think it's called, you remember the name of it, Ray?
Tactical is the one you're talking about? Yes.
Yeah,
I'm
Tactical.
part of their Discord. I watch them, but I haven't used it yet.
Yeah. Part of the problem with these is they really need to be tested thoroughly before you can get someone like me or Ray to trust them. Like we're excited. We're both open source advocates here, and we would switch to them if we thought they were the best solution. But I need someone, and this is where the funding problem comes in. You got to pay these people, like my friend Xavier, who's been on a channel before. Xavier makes a lot of money doing pen testing and application testing. Follow him on Twitter and you'll get an idea of some of the stuff he does at scale for large companies. We need someone with that high skill level to really poke at it to say, yes, this is a good product that can survive, an onslaught of things when it's on the public internet. Of course, you could get combining things, but it just makes it hard to run, where you could say, all right, I'm going to run Mesh Central and Tactical RMM, but then we're going to run zero tier. So we bridge all the networks together and tie everything together and then write a bunch of rules. That way you're not exposing it and mitigating the risk I just mentioned. But now you're talking about managing a really complex system. And is that a tenable thing you can do? Is this going to be reasonable? So I haven't used it to actually tell you enough about it, but it's still going to come back to, has it been security tested? And then again, there's Kaseya, so it clearly had not
trying
been
so hard not to say anything.
I don't mind. I have no love for them or anything like that. I don't. As a matter of fact, my favorite thing was my videos did so well when the breach happened, because every time he did a video, and I incognito this and even changed GeoIP, every video that he did, my video was always the next suggestion. I had so many views. And there's no one else doing a Kaseya video. Awesome. So he would do Kaseya breach, and I had the same title, but I have a higher position in YouTube rankings. So it couldn't help but autoplay my video after his.
And that's why we know you're a better person than me. After and look, I have nothing against Fred. He's a really good guy. Anybody who knows him personally.
Yeah, it's not a personal dig.
It's not a personal. Yeah. But like the video he did with the multicam where he was addressing the users, I would have done a response video with the multicam. I really would have, I would have had fun with that.
I wanted to go petty level too, because I was like, what amateur film documentary kid was bored and filmed this for him? Like, why did you switch between cameras? Why are you doing these different? It's not a documentary. It's just, please talk to the camera and just give me what happened, dude. I mean,
just be earnest. Own it. It sucks. We're doing the best we can. We're trying to, help our partners. You don't got to do the, guys, there's no VoIP QoS. VoIP QoS is not the true thing. You don't got to do that. That's not necessary. I love OBS. I have too much fun with OBS. but no, I mean, but it's nice to, it's nice to see, and we go back to the DDoS attacks and stuff like that. And even the Facebook engineering stuff, they put out some information, but the information we got from third-party sources was so much more detailed when it happened. And that stuff is really important, right? It's not even a diagnosis of what happened in the play-by-play, but also what should we be thinking about as the outcomes of this, right? What should be our takeaways? Because a lot of times the public statements by the publicly traded companies can't give you that level of detail. It's far more important. That's why I appreciate when guys like you do this stuff, and the Hunters guys, awesome. They start putting this stuff out, because you start looking, okay, well, I should be paying attention to this. I should be paying attention to that. And that's where the real gold is when this stuff happens. I know. It's fun, the camera offends me too.
It's fun. Yeah. I mean,
I may use it for an overhead camera or something. Yeah.
I know this overhead. What's going on here? It's why you guys can kind of see I got that mat in front of me. And I have the overhead camera you can switch to for things. I don't have it's not up there right now, so I can't do it. I don't have my other cameras on. I was just going to do this one camera thing.
Your one camera looks good, man. It's nice. You got the TV in the background. It's
and two, we got so I can do I got a really short depth of field. It's an f2 art lens. Actually, it's set at f2. It's an f1.8. So
mine's a 16 mil fixed 1.6.
Nice.
No, 1.6 or 1.4. It's the Sigma.
Sigma's 1.4.
Yeah, there you go. 1.4 16 mil. And I love it, but that's the reason I use Sony. It's for that let's see if I can do this. It's that autofocus. Let's see if it watches. Oh yeah, it did work. Okay. And that depth of field. I really love that look. So
Yeah, Sony. I have that camera over there. It's on one of my other angles. I like the Sony camera. Because I used to be a wedding photographer who always shot Canon. I went right away with the Canon C100 because I sold all my. Actually, it was funny when I started buying all this. I'd actually just recently sold, except for some of the lenses, a lot of my Canon gear for wedding photography. So it was kind of just an easy drop in for me to go ahead and use the same lenses and things like that because these are the lenses you use for that. So.
Yeah, because the speed boosts never work. Like, I don't care what anybody says. Like, I have some Canon gear. I have an old T3i and a T7, and like, you know, I'll sit there because all my stuff is APS-C or Micro Four Thirds, and so like I'll sit there and I'll try to use the speed boosters to swap lenses and use a Canon lens on a Sony gear and stuff like that, and the zoom never works, or it never works the way it's supposed to. So.
Yeah, it gets a little tricky. So that's why I went with that. But then I am using Sony lenses on my Sony. So now I have, but I finally, one of my photographer friends who I sold some of the gear to, I ended up selling some more gear. And I was trying to justify all of it because I still have like one or two things I haven't sold yet, I think.
It's funny. We were talking like in the beginning about like people get like so like defensive about which RMM and which documentation. But as an old DJ working a lot with photographers, videographers are just as bad, right? Whether you're talking Sony or Canon or, you know, whatever it is, like they get really hardcore about like what gear they're using. I'm like, oh, okay. So
they do. After I did wedding photography for a number of years, I actually became a trainer for a studio. That was part of why we did it. I would bring people in and train them, and so I would have to slow them down. And you know, the thing I would have to teach them is one, especially when it comes specifically to photographing people and weddings, is a good wedding photographer is a good director of people. Stop there before you start buying every piece of gear. Learn how to direct and understand people. And as most of my training had to do with not how to get the right f-stop, that was actually irrelevant. It was more about how to interact with people in a way to get them to smile to the camera. They're not smile to the camera, smile at you. There's a lot of nuance there, but you're right. They go gear crazy and they try to think every time their photo's bad, it's because they need another piece of gear. And then they go to those conferences that sell them all kinds of trinkets that just next thing you know, you've got all this crap hanging off your camera.
Well, it'd be easy. Trust me. Don't get me wrong. I would love to go to B&H right now and just buy a C100 and start going crazy on that. I know my problem is lighting, controlling my lighting and that stuff. Like I know exactly what's going on. And it's funny, but like you say, like, and again, back in the wedding DJ days, it was, you want to laugh? Right here, buddy. Right here. Do the same thing. You know, whatchamacallit. And but like as a wedding DJ, it was a lot of that. It was corralling people or herding cats. You're a lot nicer than I am, but it was getting people. I used to find one of the things we used to have to do was like getting them ready for the, you know, the introduction, getting them in, the first dance and stuff like that. Often they've been drinking or they, you know, or they're just amped up. They're excited. And to be able to like do that, hey, pay attention over here. You'd have to find certain ways to grab their attention, right? Whether cracking jokes and so they turn around and focus on you, and then you can do. And it teaches you really good customer service skills for other, you know, stuff like MSP and stuff like. How many times have you worked with a client that's freaking out about something going wrong? They're more focused on complaining about what's going on versus telling you what you need so you can get the job done, right?
Yeah.
And you can use those same skills.
Yeah. And I walked into, I helped another IT company that was dealing with a incident where they were cryptoed, and you know, it coming in, being cool, calm, and just getting to it. Everyone wants to start ranting about it. It's that, well, we probably should have updated this. And by the way, we're using all that. I'm like, well, that's not important right now because they encrypted. Well, what are we going to do to recover it? Let's talk about your backups. Let's see what we can recover. Let's see if I can pull a snapshot from this. You know, as everyone wanted to tell me story time and how they got there, I'm like, you're here. We can debrief it later. It doesn't matter. It's like, you know, you got to having those skills to come in and be able to calmly go through it so you can focus on the task at hand, which of course is, this was a big operation. They had 80 people not working at that time. So they're all on a payroll. How quickly can we get these 80 people back to working? So it's one of the reasons our incident response policies is we assign somebody to do the work, right? We assign somebody to be the liaison for the customer. We assign somebody to do the communications or to do the communications part of it. And the idea is that the person working, the last thing they want is somebody tapping their shoulder. What's going on? What's the update? What's going on? They need to focus. They need to focus on getting a resolution, whether it's one person or a team of people or whatever it is.
but have them separate from the person communicating with the client, because the person can I used to do this all the time. When I would visit a client, especially if it was not VCIO stuff, not glad handing and kissing babies and all that stuff, but I mean, like, when we were going because we were doing a large cabling job, or we were doing a hardware refresh, or there was something down, medical facilities, every minute down, we're losing $200 billion a year, but we can only pay $5,000 a month at MSP services. Yeah, whatever. But like, when we would go, I would always do 2-person. I would go with the tech. I would be the one that would sit down with the office manager. Oh, let's go talk. Let's catch up. Let's use this opportunity so you can tell me what's going on. Let the tech go do their job. Let them actually get the work done. And it cost me a little more in terms of labor and time and personnel, but we got the job done much faster. And almost always the client was happy because they were still handled, that you still had the conversations with them, but the job got done, because it's very hard to do both if you're one person.
Yes, because I've certainly been there when you go to the client, it's late at night, you're trying to fix something, and they want to hang out in the server room with you, asking questions. Why'd you type that command? Because I needed to. I mean, it wasn't arbitrary, let me tell you. I don't know how else to answer you right now.
or my favorite, I watched a YouTube video from this guy named Tom, so I know you're supposed to do this. It's like, let me do my job, man. Let me do
Yeah.
What did Eduardo say? I had a non-technical client who wanted to be on the engineering bridge when bandwidth was getting attacked. Oh, I can't. Wow.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. And that's like doctors that don't want you to get full body scans because you're going to find something you don't understand and you're going to freak out about it.
Yep.
Yeah. And that was what I have to give. Eduardo said it, so I can say it now, because we weren't supposed to talk about it. Don't come after me, bandwidth. But bandwidth actually, besides their public status pages, which they updated very often, besides the multiple communications from their CTO and from their CEO, bandwidth held calls several times a day, twice a day, 12 o'clock and 5 o'clock, to their partners, where there were open calls where you could ask questions. They would give you real-time status, stuff that you couldn't talk about publicly. But they did really well on the communication side. And as a customer, this is exactly what I was saying. As a customer, I felt good because I was hearing the information as it was going on. And I know the CEO is not the one fixing the stuff. The CTO is not the one fixing the stuff. They have other people doing that, but I was still getting communicated to. And I thought they did brilliant the way they handled it.
That's a tip I give to a lot of startup MSPs, because they'll remember when you didn't communicate. And my answer, even to my staff, and I beat them over the head with this because it still requires beating over the head to remind them, communicate. But it's not done. I know it's sitting there at like 2%. And when they called 15 minutes ago, it was at 2%, but still tell them it's still at 2%. Let them know. Just keep hanging away at them. We used to, back when I worked in corporate, we actually built a ton. One of my things was building automation tools. And this was in 2001, 2002. One of the ones we built those the early days of text messaging. I remember 20 years ago, text messaging wasn't a big deal.
Wow.
We found out, and this is common knowledge now, but this was not something that was easily available for that, or I don't know how common it was. When you think about this, how would you email text, automatically convert emails to text without any special, at the time it would have been BlackBerry because they were all the popular ones back then. How would you send text around 2000 directly out of your mail server to each client at locations to let them know that your trucks are arriving late?
I mean, the only ways you could do it were SMS gateways back then. Now everybody has an email address.
Well,
but like the gateways, right?
So the way we found out, and Verizon was the first one to do this, and other people followed suit, is we went and got Verizon phones and sent them to some of the plants, and it was kind of a cool thing, just giving the plant leaders a free phone. But the reason we gave it to them is so we could text them, and what our system could do was text them by the number at vzwtext.com. They turned that on all the way 20 years ago.
Email addresses,
Yeah, but
the trick is now. But how did you qualify what services they have? Because now that's just an API query. That's
it's API query. Well, that's what I said. We bought them the phones. That was part of the trick. We bought phones for the managers at the Ford plants. We mailed them the phones. It was kind of like a gift thing. And who doesn't want a free cell phone in 2000, back when these things were damn expensive? So we get them it would have been the Palm Trios, I think is the ones we got. Remember with
Yeah.
the keyboard on
Oh,
them?
those were good, man.
Yeah. Because we did explore the BlackBerry
I
system, but it allowed us to give these automatic updates that our system generated, but they always thought it was us talking to them because no one knew you could write a system to talk to someone. And we did these things back and
Yeah.
forth. It was just some fun stuff I
I remember the
automated
Palm.
20
You
years ago.
had to learn the handwriting. Like it had that little app where you had to practice handwriting
Yeah.
with that little plastic stylus. But it was
I was a
good.
huge
And
Palm
nowadays I have
fan,
an
man.
iPad Mini.
Yeah. I was a huge fan of all the Palm stuff, man. There's a company. It's my favorite statement I heard. I was listening, and I've heard it said different ways, but it's essentially it's so hard to tell a guy who's making $100 million a year he's doing it wrong because you ask the question why these big companies fall, and Palm had it. Palm could have been what ran all of our devices. They already had the market. They just needed to keep modernizing with devices, but they didn't. The Palm fell off. Never thought the world would change until it did. And this is one of those things where you watch these companies fall. You're like, how did they not see the end coming? How did BlackBerry not maintain such a hold on the market?
And HP still owns it, right? Like Palm OS still exists. It's like a TV platform or something now, right?
Yeah, I don't know what they do with it anymore. It certainly isn't what it used to be, but
No, it's not. But it could have been. Right? Like, and look at the days. Like, you had the iPac, you had was it Clio, you had like Sony's was a Clio, you had the iPac from HP. And they were great. They were great devices. iPac had that little sleeve so you could put a 3G modem on there, modem on there, put PCMCIA cards. They had really cool tech. The Palm was always the best, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And then you had the color Palm. That was phenomenal. But it could have been,
and they went down the road. Did you ever use the Sony version of it?
Yeah. The Clio. That was
Clio. Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. I love that one. And so Palm even had the concept of licensing it to other people to do hardware, just like Android. I mean, it was like they had a clunky but cool app market. I still have, because we were talking last night, I'm a digital tech hoarder, so I still have all my Palm OS games. There's a dungeon crawler I have for it. I like emulators, so sometimes I'll pull it up as I want to see.
Are you doing it like Steve Gibson? You're putting in Ziploc bags and storing in your freezer?
No, not the hardware. I have Palm OS emulator somewhere. So
there you go. Thorsten says Palm OS is now Web OS on LG TVs. Yeah, I knew it was still alive.
Yeah, I didn't. Yeah, if that's called alive, I guess the code still.
No, yeah, it's not. Yeah. Until you can flip over your TV with a stylus and start, start writing. I don't think that's the same.
You can write on the screen.
What you call it, right? I saw some questions. I feel bad because I know we're geeking out. I saw a bunch of Wi-Fi questions on there. That was one of the things Sonic walls were really bad at. Sonic wall access points. Oh man, they were so bad.
That was really hot garbage. We pulled so many of those out and replaced them with different things. The questions seem to center around Wi-Fi 6. Now, if you can find these, which they were limit 2 per customer, now they're limit 4 per customer. They're just hard to get a hold of. And I don't think Wi-Fi 6 is bad or anything like that. But do you need it? If you're looking for the ultimate speed and you need the fastest, just hardwire the thing. For the most part, you can get away with. One of my clients, and this is from the business perspective we have, when we do these Wi-Fi deployments, like the warehouse jobs we've done where we're putting in, X thousand square feet warehouse, they're not asking me for the fastest speed. Most of the time because there's a bunch of tablets attached to a high-low. And the only thing they care is that when they scan a SKU off a box with a scan gun, or if they type in something on a tablet that tells them what dock they're at, they care about the connectivity, not how fast. They're literally moving kilobits of data. If you look at the data streams on cumulative how much data you're sending, that's it. You installed 50 Wi-Fi access points and they use a few megabytes of data. I'm like, yep. They really care about connectivity. Now, Wi-Fi 6 does have a little bit advantage over that. So it's a little bit better in high density things, but are you doing high density at your house? Do you have that many devices? For the most part, you can get away with still the older Wi-Fi because you got to think about this. Like my wife, she watches Netflix all the time. So do my kids. They got a Chromecast in each of their rooms. It doesn't take a lot to run this. You don't have to overthink it. You can still get a lot of the Wi-Fi previous gen stuff for a pretty good budget, or if one or two of these, because they are sometimes not sold out on Ubiquiti, they're not bad. This is the one that I was working on a video before I got sidetracked. This is what I'm using at my house right now. It works perfectly fine. But if you're budget oriented, or you can even find some of the people who have to have the hottest and latest and greatest, buy a used one off eBay and go with one of the older UniFis, like the Nanos or the older ACLRs are still, to me, completely relevant here in 2021.
I mean, if you're that person that's deploying Cat 6 and fiber all over your house because you're doing new construction or something, yeah, go for it. But yeah, no, I'm with you. And that's kind of the thing that, like, going back to the enterprise space stuff, we don't always go the latest and greatest. It's very rare that we'll go latest and greatest. We go with tried and proven. That is that, so it's not and that's why I say, like, a 5 or 10 year refresh cycle in enterprise is not uncommon at all. It's typical game, because you want stuff that is going to last a long time. So qualify my opinions when I'm saying, like, I have problems with UniFi, or not UniFi, with Meraki or UniFi VoIP, and stuff like that, stuff that disappears. Somebody was telling me, I've been trying to search for it, I hadn't had a chance to look at it yet, but that the UniFi store now has a, what they call it, the IT section. I'm trying to see what Eric told me.
Yeah, they have this weird thing. They sell super micro servers on the UniFi store now. I don't get it.
The company known for not having stock is now selling additional items. Like, I don't get that. Like,
yeah, I don't understand that in any capacity. There's the Ubiquiti store. Yeah. Where was it at? Is it under?
I can't see it. It said, like, the IT. There you go. IT marketplace right on this.
Oh, it says labs. We're not supposed to show this in a live stream, but yeah, they're doing this.
Well, it's on the public. I'm not logged in. It's showing it to me. So
okay. You're right. I'm not logged in. So okay.
Yeah. So, like, that's the thing. Like, but why?
I don't understand. But yeah. Then
absolutely nothing against Super Micro. Obviously not. We're both fans of Super Micro, but when you have a device sold out, the stuff I'm going to go look for, are they just trying to take advantage of the traffic? Maybe.
Yeah, I don't know. Not really. That was a weird one that they've got that on there, but the Ubiquiti stuff's still pretty nice and everything else. So I think it works good for home users, because I don't like any of the generic home user stuff. Anytime I've looked at it, it's always just kind of a pain. Doesn't work very well. The interface is horrible. It's never going to get updated. Probably has SIP ALG turned on and there's no way to turn it off. It might even have the admin port open and there's no way to close it.
Well, that was the thing for a long time, and not now. I'm talking about, like, the SGs and the older UniFi routers. But they had SIP ALG enabled, and the only thing you could do is go into the CLI and disable it, and then don't touch anything. You're right.
Yeah.
So it doesn't get wiped out.
When you push it, that's one of the problems with the USG is when you push it, it re-updates that JSON file and reflips all the switches you did from the command line. And yeah.
And the whole point, and that's the thing, the whole point of UniFi is so that it's all easier to manage, right? Like, once you adopt, you cloud manage and all that stuff, it's supposed to be easier. And it is, for the most part. I'll take UniFi over Meraki 9 times out of 10. 10 times out of 10. So I got nothing. How much fun was that video you did with the super server?
Oh, that was fun. My staff thought it was less fun because I was in here. It was in it was in my lab area, which is not in the back of the building, because I don't have any 25 gig hookups in the back of my building. So it was screaming when I was doing this. Thing was just like, "Whirr!" And they're like, "Is that going to stop anytime soon?" I'm like, "Oh, the video's almost done."
I love those. I had in my other office, I had a pair of Dell 2900s. And
those
you
things.
booted up, and it was like a 787 is taking off next to you.
Yeah.
And it was, it was bad. It was like you couldn't turn it on. And I had it in a closet. I had it, and locked in. I had it in a closed rack with ventilation, specifically for noise isolation. But even in that, it was still, it was loud. I get it.
Yeah, and what's worse about it is the way it makes noise. It's a whine. It's not like just the air noise. It has this weird whir. It's kind of annoying. I won't lie.
You recognize it, like, and that's the thing. When you're in IT, you recognize fans.
Yeah,
you get it immediately.
It's just unpleasant.
I saw Frank ask a question. We talked on the DDoS video about resiliency. He put a question at 543. There you go. If we take out our PBX, we can save money. Do we need 2 service providers to secure internet connection? We don't want downtime. Frank, so when you're talking about a DR strategy, right, a disaster recovery strategy, there's going to be acceptable loss and there's going to be acceptable workarounds. And this is not just VoIP. This is all IT period, systems, all systems period. When you say you can't have downtime, are you look at for yourself, do you mean downtime that you can't redirect calls to a cell phone and use cell phones while the internet's down? Or are mobile applications okay? Or do you have to be using that desk phone? I have a desk phone here. I can't show on camera because it's still under. I can't show it yet. Or do you need a desk phone working? Because if you need the desk phone working, then make sure you have the PoE switches. Make sure you have UPSs backed up, running everything. Then yes, absolutely get dual ISPs. If cost is a concern, get a second ISP that's maybe a 4G. If you have it, the number I use is 100 kilobits per user. So you 20 users, 2 megabits, easy enough math. Knowing that VoIP is going to use a little less, and you're not going to have everybody on the phone at the same time. But if they absolutely have to have the desk phones working 100% of the time, get two ISPs that have some kind of SLA or some kind of backup. Do it. But if it's purely cost concern and you're okay using a cell phone for a little bit or the soft phone apps for a little bit, save the money on the second ISP if it's expensive. Nowadays you can get an ISP for like $40 for for 200 or 300 megs pretty cheaply in a lot of areas.
Yeah,
not everywhere.
We're lucky here in Michigan. We have literally my building is available for 2 different fiber and 3 different non-fiber providers. It's a weird competitive space we have here. I'm at this weird intersection of it. So we even can do site to site because there's a giant ass building right behind us. And one of the company we work with from time to time that does fiber, they happen to have all their site to site stuff there. So they said, we can offer you a line of sight backup off of that for Wi-Fi for even, because they cover this area. There's very few buildings that are very tall. We're in suburbia here, and there's just one oddball building. And everyone always asks why they don't tear it down. And I've always told, because it's been vacant. The building it's like a 12 or 16 story building. It's huge with nobody in it. It has no tenants forever. And it's like got a grown up parking lot. Everyone's like, it's like this big ass ugly abandoned building. And I'm like, the only reason it's there is because it's a cell tower, multiple cell towers. And it's got the entire top of it has just an array of antennas on it that pay for the building.
That's good money. Renting out that stuff, renting out rooftop space for these towers. That's major money.
Oh yeah.
So
yeah, it's kind of neat. We have a couple.
I looked at building a WISP a while back. Unfortunately, in Miami, the bands are saturated, really saturated. So like, whether it's unlicensed bands or licensed bands, there's no options here. Like the people in play are staying in play. And so, but yeah, I mean, we're fortunate here. Like right now I'm working from home. I have my office, but I work from home most of the time. And I have Comcast here where Comcast is like $100-200 for a gig. And then I have his backup. I have AT&T fiber. I mean, it's home fiber, but whatever.
Yeah.
But it's $60 for a gig. So like, yeah, okay. Why not?
Yeah. So, hey, awesome,
nice.
John. Yeah. So, I was going to bring it up though. We're going to wrap it up a few more minutes. We'll go a few more minutes. So throw us a few more questions. Throw me a few more likes. There's 150 ADU and 107 likes. And I don't think the 150 ADU are the same people we started with because I know they kind of rotate out. It doesn't tell me that, but I just suspect because I see different names in here. So
yeah. And sorry guys, like, every time Tom and I get together, we start like nerding out. Like if you have questions, that's what we're here for. I mean, we'll do other videos, but like, we're live. Ask whatever you need to ask.
Ask away. Throw some rapid fire questions in there. I don't even care if they're slightly off topic because that's usually what I do at the end. I'm like, just ask me anything. Because that's how no one's brought it up yet, but I thought it was funny. I was house shopping. And so one of my off topic things was I didn't know what a Pittsburgh toilet was. And so I had showed it on the live stream. So it turned into this discussion where someone said I should make shirts with it. But it's funny because now we're looking at houses for my daughter. And I seen a house that had a Pittsburgh toilet. And I was excited. And I explained to her what it was. And she's looking at me and goes, why do you care so much, Dad? That's my daughter's answer. Like, you seem excited that this house has a toilet in the basement.
That was one of those things that came up on Tech Bar. And it was like, it's that toilet that's in the basement that's like just freestanding by itself. And it's one of those things I had never seen in my life. And Sean told me it's a Pittsburgh toilet. And now like I can't unsee it. Now it's like when you buy a car and you start seeing your car everywhere.
Yeah.
And so it's like, it's like finding a pot of gold. It's so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Uh,
AT&T fiber routers are trash with their AK state table. Listen, I'm not arguing.
yeah,
My thing is I have backup connections. I have backups for my backups. And even then, I have my cell phone with my hotspot with Google Fi. I have we're launching an MVNO in November at IT Nation. Um, I have the 2 internet connections here. And still this past Thursday when I was doing a live stream, or what was it, Tuesday? I was doing a live stream. All 3 went out at the same time. Simon had to take over the live stream for me. I mean, I don't think
uh,
I'll run 5 ISPs to my house. Maybe.
yeah, maybe. So, it is that, and Comcast was here yesterday, and they had trouble, and it's always something with them. And even
Thanks, CK saying love watching you guys. Thank you, CK. Appreciate that.
oh yeah,
Yeah, there's Simon in the chat seeing how bad it was. He had never hosted any of these videos before. He always comes on, he comes on to help out, and he like a champ. He took over. He hosted it. I mean, he handled it. So
yeah, the Starlink backup is interesting. I think that's cool that we're getting more things like that out there, more options. It's painful. We're northern. I'll use my hand because we do it in Michigan. So I'm here in Detroit. We're right here by the Canada, and we have all these ISPs. My dad lives way up here, and yeah, there's nothing up there. There's a single WISP, and he's at the very edge of it.
yeah.
They actually made I had to strike a deal. So my dad doesn't really he just wants to be able to watch some Netflix, but they had to build a tower in his yard. He's got a bunch of acres. And the deal was if they could build the tower there, because on the other side of the lake he lives on, there's a few other people they couldn't reach at all because they're down in a valley. And my dad's on top of the lake. So it's so hard to get internet. So even with all of that, there's this one provider, and then their tower got hit by lightning, and their internet was down for like 3 weeks. Nothing they could do to get hit by lightning.
That's the bane of WISPs. That's,
yeah,
the amount, and I talked to these, I'm a member of WISPA. Like even when I was investigating and decided we weren't going to do it, we service a lot of ISPs and WISPs. And they say all the time, there's certain gear that no matter what grounding you have, no matter what isolation you have, no matter what stuff you have in place, the lightning is going to get you. It's going to happen.
yeah.
I feel bad for those guys, man.
It is. It took out not the tower in my dad's yard, but the tower that they had broadcast from. So it took out a huge area because they have several towers across northern Michigan. Like they cover a huge part of the state as one company. But when it hit it took that out, and they're like, we're trying to get as fast as we can, but this is how long it's going to take to get this. It hit the equipment, and yeah.
Do you know anybody that's using Starlink? I know a bunch of people that have ordered and are on back order. I don't know anybody actually using it.
Yeah, Chris from Crosstalk Solutions, he has it.
Okay.
He's done a series of videos on it. So he's got like a bunch of videos. He even did one of his live streams he did from the Starlink. So he's got some good breakdowns of how it works and what he thinks of it.
Nice.
This is a question that I got to do the math on to explain better. But 25 gig networking reasonable for a Cheer NAS using 500 meg SSDs. This is where the answer is very complicated. Wendell from Level in Texas dove into this topic of how hard it is with NVMEs, not SSDs. SSDs, no, you don't need 25 gig connections for SSDs. You could use it for NVMEs, but start digging into and watch Level 1 Tech's videos on Optane, NVMe, RDMA, how the network drivers are. Linus Tech Tips did a video on it because they built an NVMe array and he thought he could edit on it with 100 gig. There's some trickiness to that. There is some literal bus problems, driver problems. And one of the things, Wendell has a video, and if I can remember it, I'll ask Wendell and tag him in Twitter because he'll know which video. A great video where he breaks down. He had to work with kernel developers to do the testing because there are some alignments on PCI timing with the brand new Xeon Gold processors he was using to get the throughput he wanted. He had to compile a custom kernel with certain flags in it to get it to work. Like when you start getting these really high speed storage stuff, it goes out of there. Now, back down to more realistic. Yeah, 25 gig with NVMe. I did that. We exceeded some of in the video I just did with that Supermicro, which had 25 gig. The NVMe Kioxia SSDs, the enterprise ones in there. Yeah, you could load that up and probably saturate the 25 gig pretty good. But your standard SSDs generally don't. You just run into some problems of getting aggregate bandwidth across the bus over to the 25 gig and out with all the other things that are in between. So, but if you can afford 25 gig, absolutely build it. Like, I mean, if you don't need it, but it's not that expensive. You can pick up the card I used, I think was $200 on eBay for a 25 to SFP 28, 25 gig card. UniFi, MikroTik has some cheaper ones, but the UniFi aggravation switch, that one, that switch is under $1,000 with 4 25 gig SFP 28 ports, and build it out. Or
which is ridiculous. Like I remember like finding switches that were 24 port gig with 2 10 gig uplinks. And I was paying $5, $6, $7 grand for SMB switches with those capacities, and now you get full 10 gig switches like nothing. Like
and MikroTik, for my love and hate relationship with them because of the overly complicated UI. If you use their switches, not their router OS, I like their switches with Switch OS, and I think you can do some pretty reasonable things with them if you can sort out the model numbers.
That's my problem with Supermicro too. I love Supermicro. I have a lot of healthy respect for MikroTik because everybody, especially in the WISP community, they all use it. You know what I mean? And that was one of those things. Like I tried to practice queuing and all this stuff on the routers on router OS, and it broke me. It absolutely broke me. I reached out to, I think it was Howard. I reached out to, and I'm like, "Can you do this for me? I don't even want to be taught. Just do it because I'll pay you." Because it was one of those things that it's rough. Speaking of switches, Tom Crawford's asking about switches. If you want to, answer him on that. Is it a 24 port just above that? Yeah.
Yep. We need 24 port with a 10 gig SFP. We don't need PoE because Wi-Fi and phones are pre-installed in the building. I haven't tested the MikroTik one of that. Obviously the UniFi one's an easy answer. They make one. Their Pro series has that 10 gig ports on there but it does come with PoE. Even if you don't need it, it does come with it. I like the UniFi ones, but if you want to take the time to switch it, to learn Switch OS, not too hard. And if only thing you have to do, no layer 3 routing functions or anything more than just a few basic VLANs, that's actually relatively easy to configure on the MikroTik switches. If you want something standalone that you can log into, that's budget friendly. Oddly though, someone pointed this out, and I'm a little bit mixed on them, is the Cisco C1000s. I did a review of them, but overall, I'm kind of impressed with how inexpensive they are for being Cisco gear. And they are Cisco, for love-hate with certain aspects, they're reliable. Like Ray will probably bet his life. If you put Cisco in for the next 10 years, it will probably run until it's obsolete.
I have some Catalyst 3600s I still use today, and those are 15-year-old switches, and they have their use cases. I mean, there's certain things they're fine for. They're test benches, but they still work.
But the C1000s in there, they don't have any licenses. The confusing part, and I did a video on it where I break down a little bit of the confusion I had with them, and even my Cisco friends did too. There are certain things you can't do with them that you would expect. They kind of nerfed out a few things. They just decided that it didn't need to have, but they don't document that very well. One of those things that is weird is the command that lets you use non-Cisco SFPs in the SFP port. It doesn't work. They literally removed it only from the C1000 switches. So you have to use Cisco SFPs. And I've had so many people tell me I'm wrong. Look, I had my friend who is a diehard Cisco lover. He told me I was wrong. I said, dude, come on over. I'll get you a beer. Let you show me it working, man. I'll put money on the table. And he's like, he was swearing by the end of it.
One of my derp moments. You want to make a Cisco guy feel stupid, have him configure an SG200 or 300. I sat there and I was doing a takeover for, I did a lot of work for telcos, for CBON and AT&T and those guys. I still consult every now and again. But I was doing a takeover for them, not from them. And they had this is a couple of years ago, they had some SG200s. And they're like, yeah, we don't know how to use it. We can get into the web UI, but whatever. And I'm like, open PuTTY or MOBA Xterm is what I use. Open it. And I'm like, I'll CLI in. Don't worry about it. I'll have this configured in 2 minutes. None of my commands worked. Well, that's not true. 2/3 of my commands didn't work. And it was that frustrating. It was that some stuff did, some stuff didn't. And I'm like, it was driving me nuts. I've configured thousands of Cisco switches. And so like, I get really cautious when I see the stuff that's not Cisco enterprise gear works. It works. Absolutely. It's worth every penny. I will never argue against it. I feel there's better options for a lot of things, but reliable, you're good. I saw somebody mention Netgear managed switches. Netgear firewall, you will have to fight me kicking and screaming to ever use a Netgear firewall. But their managed switches, I've deployed not hundreds, maybe dozens of their managed switches, and they're reliable. They have lifetime warranties. They have all the layer 2, layer 3 stuff you're looking for. They have lots of features, and now they have a central management system. I haven't used it; hasn't been my need. But whatchamacallit, it's sorry, I have a buddy that's all Zyxel, so that threw me off for a second. And I was looking at the picture to see if that was Tyler or not, because Tyler's last name starts with a P too. So I was like, wait a minute. But yeah, the Netgear stuff, the managed stuff, the fully managed, they're
we have a few clients with some of the Netgear switches. I've never, no love or hate. They just seem to work. The Zyxel stuff, don't use their routers, man. Backdoors. I mean, they've had some the same things we talked about earlier in the show, just backdoor problems and things like that. They seem to work longevity wise, but I don't think firmware wise they're all that great.
Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%. They have Nebula for central management, but
which is also a little confusing on how Nebula is. Their documentation, I actually pointed out, they reached out to me when I do a video on it. I was a smart ass and replied, you guys have a lot of 404s on your documentation. That's how I replied. I said, I can't, I said, so would you consider Ubiquiti Switch to be an enterprise solution? So here's my problem is it's too hard to really absolutely say something's enterprise until you say big iron and can it do BGP. So it really, everything's about use case, and enterprise is kind of a word that's thrown out there that's probably lost its meaning. So would you use it in where he has a bunch of route announcements and some of these advanced big iron things? No, Ubiquiti's not designed for that. Would I use it, and have we used it in, I one of my install videos that I referenced where we have 25 Ubiquiti switches, 300 access points across a pretty large area. Works great. They're fine. They don't need any layer 3 routing. Nothing they do requires it. So the Ubiquiti switches were fine. They worked fine. Is that an enterprise environment? They have 8,000 users on there. Is that enterprise? I don't know. That's the problem. It's better to ask the question of what is the use case you want to use it for? What are the checkboxes you need to fulfill the order? And then you can start looking at what switches work. And if the switches don't have the feature, in some cases the UniFi just don't, then you can't even take them into consideration. That's just, it's a better way to look at it than saying, is it enterprise or not?
Yeah, because that's like what you were saying, right? Like when you're answering the question of the 25 gig with 500 megabit per second, hard drives, the answer is it depends. I do use edge switches in some of my racks in my data centers. They're for very specific applications. They're not my top of rack switches. They're not my aggregation layer or my core layer, but I do use them for very specific cases because they work well. They have some limitations, right? Like you can't have more than one. You can have multiple lags, but you can't have more than one port mirror. So they have certain things that are a problem, but for like some out of band management stuff, and or some management layer, not compute, not storage layer, but for management layer communications, they work fine. So I use them, and that's the thing. Enterprise, SMB, you're going to find gear and you're going to say, I want this one piece of gear to do everything, right? And that's a very normal thing. I want my router to do my Wi-Fi. I don't think any of us recommend router with Wi-Fi built in, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I want my router, but even the router, I want my router to be my firewall, to be my IDS, my IPS, my filtering, my this, my that. When you're in the enterprise space, your IDS, IPS is a different device than your router, is a different device than your firewall. They're whole different stacks. So to say enterprise, it's very specific use case. So don't get caught up on that. It's a whole different thing.
And it's funny because I've had a lot of people to say, well, PFSense isn't using the enterprise. I'm like, I have a video, if you go back, where I talk about open source in the enterprise. What I did was, this actually changed. They hide this in an interesting way. I'll get to in a second. But I pointed out that a lot of these large companies, which does include Visa, MasterCard, it's kind of odd. They are job posting listings were for hiring people with PFSense. And then someone go, well, PFSense doesn't support all the right filtering. I'm like, those are separate devices in the enterprise. They're using it in a data center because it can do really complex routing. And that's what it's using for. They're not trying to filter and be an all-in-one device that sits inside the network and does all this content filtering and things like that. Like a lot of people have in their head, like that means enterprise because it can do content filtering. No. We've installed these in a lot of colos, a lot of data centers, and it handles a pretty high volume of traffic. It can do a lot of complex routing. It does get into being able to do BGP style things and route announcements and things like that. And so it is used in those spaces. The reason they don't do it anymore, though, is a lot of companies are realizing it's a security problem, and people were doing open source intelligence, and you would just go, it was kind of became common knowledge, and a lot of the threat actors did this as well. You just go look at what they're hiring for. Oh, look, they're hiring for people for this. I know that we're running in their stack is this. And then you can look for a flaw that is in that stack. And especially if they're hiring, they may not have that flaw patched because they don't have a staff member to patch it. So it becomes an attack vector. A lot of companies use, my friend worked for a Fortune 100, and it's interesting because it's so obscure. They won't even let him have LinkedIn where he works. And they also won't, when he hired in, he didn't know who he was even hiring for. Like all the interview questions, they obscured the actual name of the company. Everything's like this contract company. And then after you find out what job you're getting, they pass you inside, but they kind of obscure, so you don't get a lot of information. It was really weird process, but then he landed a good job like that. So yeah, it's hard. It's actually been harder for me to find that information to do another video on it because companies use these kind of middlemen.
Even when I was talking about working with Eric and, and helping you guys migrate, that's why I was very cautious not to say exactly what you're using. Not that I think you care, not that you don't have hundreds of videos out there, but the thing is just, I'm in that headspace that we don't say what we're using, period, publicly. Like that's a normal thing. And it's not, we all know security by obscurity is not really, reliable, but we're not going to give them that one extra piece of information to start, going after us. Same reason we, adjust our headers and adjust our stuff. And to give you an idea, enterprise also has very specific needs depending on the type of enterprise, right? Some people need high throughput. In my world, connections per second is king. We have a lot of connections that we have to keep in memory, and we have a lot of connections per second that we need to be able to handle and pass through quickly. Now, in other spaces where you're doing, maybe something in AWS or in Azure, and you're doing, hosted compute, or you're doing, VMs for other purposes, you may not have those needs. That may not be. Then it's just resiliency, or it's just, being able to change routes on a need basis.
Yeah,
there's a 2-hour video right there.
Yeah, it's our video. Me and Ray are going to be of the same mind of PFSense over SonicWall. We're not. Neither one of us are big SonicWall fans. I just, and SonicWall, especially, they have a complex license history. I don't know where they stand now, but I know some of the previous ones had some weird licensing on there. And then they were also subject because of the way their stack works. They were part of that. It was a. Steve Gibson did a good breakdown of it. I think you remember like the stack that a lot of them use. SonicWall was on that list because it's some weird TCP/IP stack they bought from some obscure company that wrote it. And
that's the one that did the that they went off the reference spec that specifically said, "Don't do this. This is proof of concept only."
Yep.
I remember that.
They've updated it since then, but there's been a lot of flaws in SonicWall. I mean, when you have the choice, honestly, open source, because it gets a lot more looking at it, and the core of PFSense, as that someone will point out, PFSense isn't fully open source because PFSense Plus has a couple components in it. Yeah, I know. But the core of it is auditable, accessible. You can command line in and see what's going on, dive into the details of it. It's one of the reasons it's so popular, and more, even the large enterprise companies, they're trusting more open source because they're scared after all these things that happen with some of these closed source companies, or just the track record hasn't been good with some of these other enterprise companies out there.
At the end of the day, somebody else gave really good advice about the switch selection. Use what's in your management network. Use what's already in your current ecosystem. That's not a bad call for a lot of people. If you're a SonicWall person, I was a SonicWall person for a long time. Today, if I'm going to deploy something new at SMB, it's not going to be SonicWall. The value, the dollar per throughput through gigabit or through megabit just isn't there. When you look at devices, and that's a concern, right? We were talking about ISPs availability. A lot of us have available, either symmetrical gig or in some cases 2.5 gig, right?
Yeah.
If you're going to put a SonicWall that's going to be able to do IDS, full filtering IDS on 2.5 gig, First of all, I don't think one exists. Besides
I
the
agree. I don't
supermassive,
think so
even the
either.
supermassive. Yeah, but I don't think. But if you found one, you're going to be spending $30,000, and if you're spending $30,000 on a sonic wall, you're making a mistake. There's other devices, which is why I like the PFSense stuff, because, and that's what he recommended. That's what Tom recommended, and that's what I'll install at home. But that's the kind of thing you can control your hardware. You can control so many aspects. You can deep dive into making changes to it. I have a lot of healthy respect for that. The exact reasons I have complaints about Meraki, those are the exact reasons I like PFSense.
Yeah. And someone asked the question, but you're asking the question wrong, and that's why I bring this up. How many clients would PFSense be able to handle before considering having a dedicated DHCP server? No, you don't want to create network segments that are so big that that's even a concern. You start segmenting out the network into different ways. It's really not the DHCP. I don't think there's, there is probably a limit, but I don't think that's where the limit is.
I can't imagine. It's just text in a table. It's not a whole lot of.
It's not a lot of data, but and you've probably seen this. Someone's like, just keep making the subnet bigger. Don't do /24. Just keep.
Don't supernet, please. Don't supernet.
Supernet. And I that's where
I love that. Oh, we're running out of IP addresses, so let's just make it a /23. No, do not do that. Please don't do that.
Yeah, start thinking about segmentation so it becomes less of an issue. It could be a whole other conversation on network design and things like that. I will throw out there, a lot of people ask me, I just don't have an opinion myself. I see both opinions. Some people love it, some people hate it. I don't know. I haven't used Sophos. I'm not that interested in it. And then I did learn something about Sophos. There's actually two versions out there because they had their own product. They bought another product and they branded it all Sophos, is what someone explained to me, but it's not the same. So you have to decide which line. Is it Sophos or Sophos NG? I think is the new one, but they're two different product lines they bought. I don't think Sophos is a bad company. I've had a lot of people tell me though they're way overcomplicated with a bad UI to configure. Haven't used them, so I can't really answer.
It's funny because, so I want to address real quick. Somebody said SonicWall is not good for VoIP. SonicWall does work for VoIP. I can tell you, we ran SonicWall in our data centers for a long time. Much lower resources than we need today. And like I said, I said at the beginning of this, I've given presentations. You can use SonicWall for VoIP. Throw that out the window. But it's the same reason a lot of people, VoIP providers back in the day, would argue with you if you use Netgear switches, saying, "Oh, because they have SIP ALG." First of all, SIP ALG is an application that resides on a router, not on a switch. So the switches don't have it, but it was that misunderstanding, and they would argue it's a whole thing. But Sophos, on the Sophos side, I like Sophos for MSPs. And again, it's not going the open source route, right? Like, obviously Tom's very open source. I like open source a lot. There's no question. I use a lot of open source tools myself. If you're going to go toward the MSP side and you want to maybe look at Sophos, I like them in their space. But do what works for you. Do what you're trained on. Do what you understand.
Yeah, and someone says that the Sophos, they said the support's top notch. Cool things they do is you have the Sophos AV stuff along with the Sophos firewall, and they can get the full tie-in all together in a dashboard. That's cool. One of the worst things is, and my friend was telling me, we'll talk offline, Ray, I got to share. And I sorry guys, I cannot share all of this, but it's some crazy incident response. But a lot of it had to do with someone who didn't understand the firewall and opened it up and caused the incident, and someone got into their network. One of the worst things you can do is choose a firewall based on something Tom said, but not because you know it. And if you do that, you could end up being the person that accidentally sets an any rule and lets a bunch of things into your network and misconfigures it because you don't understand the product. So it's really important that you don't just listen to what Tom and Ray say. Also take the time to understand the product. If you know a product better, you are probably better at securing it than we are, because if we don't know the product, and I'm at least smart enough to say I will hire someone smart enough to do it. But the incident, I'll say this much because I can't say real big details, but essentially what happened was person let something in, and they have really good logging. It's kind of a situation where they had logs to what happened, and a person opened the firewall, and the script kiddie got in because they were literally Googling, how do I hack and how do I export files? And they did export files and stuff. So
I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've seen that where, like, I'll get to a client and we'll take over a client, or we'll take over somebody, or we're helping somebody out. And what's the first thing you do when, like, you're troubleshooting some kind of permission error, right? You'll disable the firewall or you'll disable AV. and as not the edge firewall, please, for the love of God, don't do that. I'm talking about the endpoint firewall. But like, these are troubleshooting steps, but you got to put the stuff back, and it's only to see the full traffic so you can understand what's going on, so you can fix it. That's not the solution to disable the firewall. But I've seen stuff as crazy as like putting putting VoIP phones on public IPs on each of the VoIP phones. Mind-boggling. And stuff like that. I mean, yeah, it'd be really easy to say, hey guys, don't do any of this stuff. Just go grab some Palo Alto, some PAN 850s or something. Go spend a couple grand and you'll be fine. But if you can't configure it and you can't troubleshoot it, and you can't, you know what I mean?
If you think the solution is just open it all up, you're not going to really help your situation.
And there's far less videos on PAN and Juniper and the big, Nexus 9Ks than there are guys like Tom that are showing you how to do stuff with PFSense. Yes. So you're better off just, stick with what you can.
Go with something you can find documentation on. All right, we're going to wrap this up here, but I will leave you with something that I didn't tell Ray, but you'll laugh knowing this, because this is something I can disclose. One of the clients we took over, they had free PBX, but the other IT people just were really horrible. And my favorite comment, they use PFSense too, by the way, was they created a lot of open rules. And in the comments, because you can add comments to the rules in PFSense, it said, we'll fix later. It was like 6 months, 9 months old. But that's where the fun begins. And
but they documented.
They did document. I love that. We'll fix later. Great. You opened up the firewall, and they just kept opening up more stuff to the free PBX system. Someone got into the free PBX system and turned it into a robo-dialer. So someone got in, and that's what they chose to do with it, because they had a weak password for free PBX. And then they were just spam calling everyone. And the way the client found out was they got the bill for all the phone calls, and they got blacklisted. They couldn't call their customers anymore because they were on blacklists and blocked because they were just illegal robocalling. And it was like, I'm like, how does all this calamity of stupid happen? Started with some open firewall.
That's what would happen with a lot of free PBX. They would go and they'd modify dial plans in the additional config files or the custom config files, and they start doing custom dial plans in there so that anybody can call in, and they can start calling out to international numbers that are high toll fraud rate centers, or they would set it so that any inbound call redirected to these fraud centers. And they would rack up tens of thousands of dollars in bills before the phone company caught it. It's scary out there.
It reminds me of the old phone freaking days when you would just war dial and find open stuff, and then all right, we won't go in there. I don't know what the statute of limitations is.
A washer that worked like a dime on a payphone. Yeah, man.
Oh yeah. I don't. Oh God. Well, actually, they're not really in reach.
Do you have a blue box with you? If you have a blue box in your office, I'm gonna a whole new level of respect for you, man.
No, I don't have a blue box. But the one thing I do keep that's not digital is I have all these for years, and there's stacks of them behind me. So I've read all of them, many of them twice. I'm a huge 2600. This was, one of my
awesome. Blue boxes right there on the cover.
Yeah, the blue box on the cover. Yes. So absolutely. This the phone, this is where I started, was a lot of the phone stuff. I've always been like you, long time tech nerd and things like that. I will leave links down below where you can find Ray's channel. You can watch Tech Bar. We did you can also see the other videos we already did on here. But on Ray's channel, I did some videos where we ate hot sauce, and I talked to Ray and eating hot things too. Which Simon regretted the most.
Yeah, I had to run off and go get water because you had me beat. See, but you guys cheated though a little bit. You didn't tell us not to chew. I mean,
the hot chocolate.
The benefit of experience.
Yeah. But I have video. My staff did the one chip challenge. I haven't done it yet. This is actually mine, and I got to wait till I have some time where I don't want to be busy, because it killed productivity in the office for a while, man. We're just like, it was rough.
I love that you were telling me you were identifying the changes they made to the chips. Like, It's not that it's already the hottest chip available. It's that, the old version and now the new version, and you're still willing to try it. You are something else, man. That's amazing.
But I have a Captain Crunch whistle. On my to-do list is the 3D print one, because I don't have one. So I thought about 3D printing a Captain Crunch whistle. So Google
that'd be
that for
kinda
those of
cool.
you
Yeah.
youngsters that have no idea what that even means and what a Captain Crunch is with a whistle and why it even matters and how it relates to the title of this magazine right here. So,
And while you're at it, go watch War Games because that was actually pretty realistic as far as the
oh yeah,
possibilities.
wow, War Games, yep. But then watch Hackers, completely unrealistic, just a good movie. It's a classic.
That's always the fun.
Because you
Multiple
can
people
hack
on
the
one
get some,
keyboard.
and you can see Penn
Yeah,
Jillette and his silliness of it.
that was good stuff. It's still a good time to watch, though. Still entertaining as a movie.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
You know, there's one of the funniest side stories that came out of it was Penn Jillette got detained when he flew to England for the filming of that show in Hackers.
Really?
Yeah, he had a couple. They knew he was a magician, and he also doesn't like the TSA. If you remember, he's kind of someone like counterculture to that. But he had you're supposed to declare when you travel X amount of dollars, like $10,000, I think it is.
Yeah.
He had $9,000 something in cash. And he was being a dick to the TSA people type thing. And this is before the actual 9/11 stuff. So this is that old. But what's funny is they found all these weird things on him because he's a magician. And he had these giant, they were like solid balls or part of a trick you do, but they actually don't open, but they kept wanting to open them because he thinks he's a magician. He thinks there's magic. So to be a dick, he smashed one on the table and it cracked the table to prove it wouldn't open. And when they arrested him, then they found the money and thought he was, drugs. And it was just he has a whole breakdown he does of it. It's hysterical what led up to him before he actually sat down and read his script for the hacker movies.
I mean, meanwhile, he's one of the most famous magicians in the entire world. I mean, that's awesome. No, he's funny, man. I watch anything he comes out with. I watch because he's
hysterical. He's just got all kinds of fun. So I've read his books, and then he does his podcast, the Penn Sunday School. He just rambles on about magician stuff, which is or just entertainment stuff, and it's kind of it's a guilty pleasure. I got no tech reason to tell you to listen to it. It's just he's entertaining at times.
It's good stuff. Yeah,
he did his when he did his diet book because he lost all that weight. You know how he prefaced it because the lawyers are like, "Oh, you're gonna have to have a disclaimer." He says, if you get your health advice from a magician, you're an asshole. This is the beginning of his book. That's what he wrote as a preface. No one should listen to a business magician.
I love him because he doesn't respect stupid. He expects everyone is intelligent and reasonable. Yeah. Like he was doing I was watching something he did with I don't want to. I'm not shaming her. She goes by Fat Amy. She was in the the movies with the Bellas. I can't remember the name of it. Anyway, with the cups and stuff. But he was doing a magic trick with her, and he was saying people aren't stupid. Magic is stupid, and magic is getting people to, getting the person to pay attention to the stupid thing and not realize how stupid it is. But the audience absolutely real. And he was doing stuff like cutting rope, but he was showing them that he was using fake rope. And I love that approach. It's not, he just respects everybody's intelligence. And I love that.
It makes it a lot of fun, the showing how the trick is done because the deception, and kind of related to that because his basis is a lot. And if you, I think he died last year. Amazing Randy, you're maybe familiar with him. But there's a good documentary on Netflix called An Honest Liar. And it's about the history of Randy and not wanting to fool people and kind of debunk some of the things where people were kind of just scam artists. And he became famous because of debunking scam artists. And they said, oh, this is a better way to do magic. You can do magic in not saying, oh, I'm going to mentally trick you. And this is a trick of the ancient mystic. No, this is, I'm going to fool you. You're going to try and figure out how I do this, but I'm not going to tell you. It's going to be fun. Or maybe I will tell you and it's still going to be fun. So,
I mean, one of the oldest magic tricks. This is how you entertain people and piss off your wife at the same time. One of the oldest magic tricks, right? The French drop, you take it and you do that. I mean, that is everybody knows you're doing this. Yeah. Everybody knows. And it's still fun to watch every single time. You don't have to, they don't have to lie to you for it to be an entertaining thing.
No.
And
completely different concept. All right, we're babbling on. My wife messaged me. I think I got food at home, so I think I'm gonna go do that now. Oh,
so yeah. But thanks for having me on, man. This was fun.
Awesome. We'll do this again sometime, and look forward to doing the video on the vendor stuff. We'll figure out that coming soon because man, people need it. People need it for sure.
We all do.
All right. Thanks everyone. If you haven't hit the like button, hit it. If you're watching this in the post world, hit the like button. Still, it works after the live stream too. All right.
Thanks guys.